Hey everyone. Tonight we're embarking on an extended journey into the darkest corners of our planet's oceans, places so remote and mysterious that they might as well exist on another world entirely. From ancient predators lurking in the crushing depths to ghostly sounds that have baffled scientists for decades. From shipwrecks that seem to defy explanation to underwater phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality itself. The ocean is not just a body of water, but a vast living enigma that covers over 70% of our planet, yet we've explored less than 5% of what lies beneath those deceptively calm surfaces. That means there's an entire universe of secrets waiting in the darkness below, mysteries so profound and unsettling they make our most terrifying nightmares seem tame by comparison. So before we begin our descent into these watery shadows together, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy these explorations into the unknown with me. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I'm always fascinated to see who's brave enough to join these lengthy midnight expeditions into the abyss. Now dim the lights, wrap yourself in something warm, and let's ease into tonight's extended journey through the ocean's most disturbing secrets. When most people think of the ocean, they envision sunlight dancing on gentle waves, colorful fish darting through coral reefs, and perhaps dolphins playing in a ship's wake. But tonight, we're going somewhere else entirely. We're venturing to realms where light has never penetrated, where the pressure would crush your body in an instant, and where creatures exist that seem to belong to another epoch of Earth's history altogether. The ocean isn't simply water. It's a three-dimensional alien landscape that exists right here on our own planet, filled with beings so strange they defy imagination and laws that operate completely outside our terrestrial understanding. Picture yourself floating on the ocean's surface on a perfectly still night. The water stretches out like black glass, reflecting distant stars you can barely distinguish. But beneath you, extending downward for miles, is an abyss so profound that if you were to drop Mount Everest into certain parts of it, the mountain's peak wouldn't even break the surface. And in that unimaginable darkness, things are moving, things are hunting, things are waiting. The ocean doesn't concern itself with your comfort zone or your deepest fears. It functions according to principles so foreign to our land-dwelling minds that even our most sophisticated scientific instruments struggle to comprehend them. In the deepest trenches, the pressure exceeds 1,000 times what you're experiencing as you listen to this right now. It would be comparable to having 50 jumbo jets simultaneously pressing down on every square inch of your body. And yet, in this seemingly uninhabitable environment, life not only exists but flourishes. Not merely survives, but thrives. Organisms that have never glimpsed sunlight, never experienced warmth, existing in an eternal world of midnight and bone-chilling cold. They've adapted to conditions so extreme, they might as well inhabit an entirely different planet. Some generate their own ghostly illumination, creating constellations of bioluminescence in the absolute darkness. Others have evolved to be nearly transparent, like living phantoms drifting through the water column. But what truly keeps marine biologists awake at night is this: we keep discovering new entities down there. New species, new ecosystems, new mysteries that fundamentally challenge our understanding of life on Earth. Every deep-sea expedition returns with footage of organisms that look as if they materialize from someone's most disturbing hallucinations. And for each new discovery, countless more questions emerge. The ocean has been guarding its secrets for billions of years, and it has no intention of surrendering them easily. It jealously protects its mysteries, hidden beneath miles of lightless water and devastating pressure. But tonight, we're going to plunge into that alien world and explore some of the most spine-tingling, sleep-disrupting, utterly fascinating enigmas concealed in the depths. Because if you believe you understand what's truly frightening, wait until you hear about what's been living in the deepest parts of our planet's oceans, directly beneath our feet, all this time. And perhaps the most unsettling aspect of all, we've barely scratched the surface. Let's begin our journey in a location that sounds as if it were pulled directly from a horror film, the Mariana Trench. Situated in the western Pacific Ocean, this underwater canyon represents the deepest known section of Earth's oceans, descending more than 36,000 feet below sea level. To properly contextualize that depth, consider this: if you could somehow remove all water from the Mariana Trench and place Mount Everest inside it, the mountain's peak would still be submerged by more than a mile. The Mariana Trench isn't merely deep, it's utterly alien. The pressure there is so intense that it would instantly compress any human body into something resembling pulverized tissue. The temperature hovers just above freezing, and there's no sunlight, no warmth, no comfort of any kind. It's as close to visiting another world as possible without leaving Earth's boundaries. In 2012, filmmaker James Cameron became one of the few humans to ever visit the bottom of the trench in his specially designed submersible, the Deep Sea Challenger. What he found there wasn't emptiness, but life, strange, resilient life that is adapted to conditions we can barely comprehend. Creatures with translucent skin, bizarre appendages, and feeding strategies so alien they seem to belong to another evolutionary timeline entirely. One such resident is the Mariana snailfish, a small, pinkish creature that somehow survives at depths where the pressure would crush most submarines. Its body contains special proteins and cellular adaptations that allow it to endure conditions that would instantly kill most other organisms on the planet. But perhaps most unsettling is what we don't see in the trench. Scientists have detected sounds down there, strange, mechanical-sounding noises that don't match any known marine creature's vocalizations. Some researchers speculate these might be the calls of unknown megafauna, massive creatures living in the darkness that remain undiscovered, perhaps descendants of prehistoric marine reptiles, or evolved forms of species we thought were extinct millions of years ago. Other mysteries lurk in the trench as well. During various expeditions, sensors have picked up unusual electromagnetic anomalies that defy conventional explanation. Some instruments have malfunctioned in ways that engineers cannot account for, as if something in the extreme depths interferes with our technology. Military sonar operators have reported tracking large, fast-moving objects at depths where nothing should be able to move quickly due to the crushing pressure. These unidentified submersible objects, USOs as some researchers call them, move in ways that contradict our understanding of physics and biology. They appear on tracking systems, then vanish completely, only to reappear miles away in impossibly short timeframes. Are these equipment malfunctions caused by the extreme conditions, or is there something down there that we haven't classified yet? Something that calls the absolute darkness of the trench its home. Something that perhaps doesn't want to be found. The truth is that we know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the bottom of our own oceans. Each expedition to the Mariana Trench returns with more questions than answers, more mysteries than solutions. And while scientists maintain their rational approach to studying this alien environment, those who have actually been down there often return changed. They speak of an overwhelming sense of being watched, of feeling like unwelcome intruders in an ancient realm that humans were never meant to enter. James Cameron himself has said that, at the bottom of the trench, he felt completely isolated from all of humanity, and described the experience as being on another planet. But was he truly alone, down there in the darkness? Or were unseen eyes watching him from just beyond the reach of his submersible's lights? Moving from the extreme depths to somewhat shallower waters, let's explore another marine mystery that has baffled scientists for decades: the Baltic Sea anomaly. In 2011, a Swedish diving team discovered a strange circular formation on the ocean floor of the Baltic Sea. The object, approximately 200 feet in diameter, bears an uncanny resemblance to the fictional spacecraft Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. Initial sonar scans revealed what appeared to be a perfectly circular object with unusual structural features, including what some have interpreted as corridors, walls, and even a staircase. Adding to the mystery, electronic equipment mysteriously malfunctions when boats pass directly over the anomaly. Satellite phones stop working. Underwater cameras fail and navigational equipment goes haywire, as if some force is interfering with electromagnetic signals. Mainstream scientists offer various explanations, suggesting it might be a glacial deposit, a natural geological formation, or perhaps a sunken World War II anti-submarine device. But these explanations don't fully account for the object's symmetrical nature or the consistent equipment malfunctions reported in its vicinity. Some more controversial researchers have suggested the possibility that it's an ancient technological artifact, perhaps evidence of advanced civilizations that existed before recorded history. Others go further, proposing extraterrestrial origins or connections to legendary locations like Atlantis. Whatever the Baltic Sea anomaly actually is, it remains insufficiently explained by conventional science. Subsequent expeditions have been hampered by equipment failures, funding issues, and strangely, bureaucratic obstacles that have prevented thorough investigation. It sits there on the seafloor, a silent, circular enigma that continues to defy easy categorization. Is it simply an unusual natural formation that coincidentally resembles something manufactured? Or is it evidence of something more profound, an anomaly in both form and in our understanding of history itself? Speaking of historical mysteries, few ocean enigmas have captured the human imagination quite like the legend of the Bermuda Triangle. This roughly triangular region of the Atlantic Ocean, bounded by Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, has allegedly claimed hundreds of ships and aircraft over the centuries. Stories tell of vessels that disappear without distress calls, planes that vanish from radar in clear weather, and crews that seemingly evaporate into thin air, leaving behind perfectly intact ghost ships drifting aimlessly on the currents. One of the most famous cases occurred in 1945 when 5 U.S. Navy torpedo bombers, collectively known as Flight 19, disappeared during a routine training exercise. The aircraft and their 14 crew members vanished completely, and the search planes sent to find them also disappeared, adding another 13 men to the toll. No wreckage from either Flight 19 or the search aircraft was ever recovered, despite one of the most extensive air and sea searches in U.S. naval history. The mystery deepened when a man named Columbus claimed to have transmitted this message just before the disappearance. "Don't come after me. They look like they're from outer space." While skeptics have proposed natural explanations like unusual magnetic anomalies, rogue waves, or methane gas eruptions from the seafloor, these don't fully account for all the reported phenomena. Some incidents describe electronic equipment going haywire, compasses spinning wildly, and clouds forming instantaneously around vessels before they disappear. Survivors of Bermuda Triangle incidents have reported experiencing time distortions, where what seemed like minutes to them turned out to be hours, according to those outside the area. Other witnesses describe seeing unusual lights beneath the water's surface, or strange fogs that appeared and disappeared with unnatural suddenness. Perhaps most disturbing are the accounts of ghost ships, found drifting within the triangle's boundaries. The most famous is the Mary Celeste, discovered adrift and deserted in 1872, with the lifeboat missing but all crew possessions, including valuables, left behind. The captain's log showed nothing unusual in its final entry, and a meal was left half-eaten on the table, as if the crew had been interrupted mid-bite and forced to abandon ship for reasons unknown. No trace of the crew was ever found. What force could be powerful enough or terrifying enough to make an entire crew abandon ship without taking any provisions, without sending distress signals, without leaving any clue as to what happened? And why do these disappearances continue to occur despite modern navigation technology and our supposedly complete understanding of oceanic phenomena? Some fringe researchers point to unusual seismic activity in the region, suggesting that it might create temporary disruptions in space-time, essentially small wormholes that could transport matter from one location to another. Others propose that the area might be subject to extremely localized and powerful electromagnetic phenomena that can disable equipment and disorient human perception. Military testing is another theory, with some speculating that the region has been used for classified weapons testing that occasionally goes wrong, with civilian craft becoming unintended casualties. Whatever the truth may be, the Bermuda Triangle remains one of the ocean's most persistent mysteries, a place where the normal rules of reality seem to become flexible, where ships and aircraft continue to disappear under circumstances that defy easy explanation. And perhaps the most unsettling aspect is that the Bermuda Triangle is not the only such zone on our planet. Similar areas exist in the Sea of Japan, the Dragon's Triangle, off the coast of Antarctica, and in several other remote oceanic regions, suggesting that whatever causes these anomalies might be more widespread than we care to admit. Let's dive even deeper into the realm of underwater sounds that shouldn't exist, starting with perhaps the most famous, the bloop. In 1997, NOAA hydrophones stationed around the Pacific detected an ultra-low frequency sound so powerful that it was picked up by sensors more than 3,000 miles apart. The sound, which when sped up resembles something between a deep rumble and an organic moan, was one of the loudest underwater sounds ever recorded. It was several times louder than the blue whale, previously considered the loudest animal on Earth, and came from a region of the southern Pacific that is largely unexplored. Scientists initially couldn't identify the source, noting that it had characteristics of a biological origin but was simply too loud to be produced by any known creature. This led to speculation about massive unknown marine organisms, creatures far larger than blue whales that might live in the unexplored abyssal depths. Some pointed to H.P. Lovecraft's fictional Cthulhu as a half-joking reference point, noting that the sound originated near the fictional location of the sunken city of Raleigh, where this cosmic entity was said to lie dreaming. Years later, NOAA scientists suggested that the sound might have been caused by a large icequake, the cracking of massive ice shelves in Antarctica, but this explanation hasn't fully satisfied everyone. The distinctive pattern of the sound doesn't perfectly match other recorded icequakes, and questions remain about why this particular event was so much louder and more distinctive than other ice calving events. Some researchers continue to believe that the bloop represents evidence of biological activity from an undiscovered marine species, one of enormous proportions. Equally mysterious is the sound known as Julia, recorded in 1999 in the equatorial Pacific. Unlike the bloop, Julia had a more sustained, almost mechanical quality that rose in frequency over its 1-minute duration. The sound bears no resemblance to known geological events like volcanoes or earthquakes, nor does it match the acoustic signature of any identified marine creature. Some analysts have noted similarities between Julia and certain man-made sounds, like metal scraping against metal under enormous pressure, but no human structure or vehicle was reported in the area at the time. Could it represent some kind of technological activity occurring in deep waters, perhaps an unknown submarine or research installation? Or is it evidence of something more exotic, structures or entities that exist in the lightless depths that operate according to principles we don't yet understand? Then there's the slowdown, detected in 1997, a sound that began as a high-frequency tone that gradually decreased over the course of about 7 minutes. The pattern doesn't match any known natural phenomenon and seems almost intentional in its regularity. Some have compared it to the Doppler effect created by an object moving away at enormous speed, as if something massive was rapidly retreating into deeper waters. But what could move so quickly at depths where the pressure should severely restrict movement? And what could be large enough to generate a sound detectable across thousands of miles of ocean? Perhaps even more disturbing is the upsweep, an unidentified sound that has been actively detected since 1991 and continues to this day. The upsweep consists of a series of narrowband acoustic waves that sweep upward in frequency over time and follow seasonal patterns, becoming louder during spring and fall. Its persistence for over 3 decades eliminates many potential explanations, like one-time geological events or temporary human activities. The sound's seasonal variation suggests either a biological source or a connection to annual changes in ocean temperature or currents. But no known creature makes sounds with this specific pattern, especially not at volumes that can be detected across entire ocean basins. Some researchers have reluctantly suggested the possibility that the upsweep might represent communication attempts from an intelligent source, noting the regularities in its pattern and its apparent response to environmental changes. Is something down there trying to communicate? And if so, with whom? Among underwater acoustic phenomena, few are as haunting as the sound known as the whistle. First recorded in 1997 in the remote South Pacific, the whistle is characterized by an eerie, almost musical quality that rises and falls in pitch like a ghostly siren call. Unlike the deep rumbles of most unexplained ocean sounds, the whistle occupies a frequency range closer to human vocalization, making it particularly unsettling to listen to. Audio analysts have noted that the sound contains harmonic structures that typically only occur in deliberate musical compositions or complex animal vocalizations, not in random natural phenomena. When the recording was first analyzed, several oceanographers reportedly refused to continue working with it, claiming it caused intense feelings of dread and persistent nightmares. One researcher allegedly claimed that after listening to the sound repeatedly, he began hearing it even when the recording wasn't playing, as if it had somehow imprinted itself on his consciousness. The location where the whistle was recorded adds another layer of mystery. The region is known to sailors as the Screaming 60s due to the ferocious winds that howl across that latitude, and it has historically been associated with maritime legends about sirens and sea witches. Historical ship's logs from vessels that traversed these waters in the 18th and 19th centuries occasionally mention crew members going mad after claiming to hear singing coming from beneath the waves. Several incidents describe sailors jumping overboard, apparently trying to reach the source of these sounds, with one captain writing that he had to physically restrain multiple crew members who seemed possessed by an unnatural desire to enter the water. Could these historical accounts be connected to whatever generates the whistle? Is there something in that region of the ocean that can affect human minds through sound? And if so, is it a natural phenomenon we don't yet understand, or something more deliberate? Moving from sounds to sights, let's explore the phenomenon of underwater lights, unexplained luminous events reported by sailors, divers, and coastal residents throughout history. Unlike bioluminescence produced by known marine organisms, these lights often display movements and behaviors that suggest intelligence or technological origin. In the Caribbean Sea, particularly around Puerto Rico, fishermen have for centuries reported seeing large, organized formations of lights moving beneath their boats. These lights reportedly move in geometric patterns, perfect circles, triangles, and straight lines that no school of natural bioluminescent creatures could maintain. Witnesses describe them as being much brighter than any known bioluminescent organism, sometimes illuminating the water's surface from depths of hundreds of feet. Even more strangely, these lights sometimes reportedly rise from the water, transforming into what witnesses describe as structured aerial phenomena before descending back into the depths. Similar accounts come from the South China Sea, where local fishermen call them dragon lights and consider encountering them extremely bad luck. According to regional folklore, boats that follow these lights too far from shore sometimes disappear entirely, with no wreckage ever found. Modern witnesses describe these lights as pulsing with almost hypnotic regularity, creating sensations of lost time among observers. Some witnesses report watching the lights for what seemed like minutes, only to discover that several hours had actually passed. In 2014, the crew of a Chinese fishing vessel claimed to have captured video footage of these lights, showing what appeared to be massive, organized light formations moving in synchronized patterns beneath their boat. The footage was reportedly confiscated by authorities shortly afterward, and official statements dismissed the sightings as bioluminescent algae, an explanation that fails to account for the reported behaviors. Along the Norwegian coastline, particularly in deep fjords, a different type of underwater light phenomenon has been reported. Witnesses describe seeing what appear to be illuminated structures beneath the water, geometric arrangements of steady lights that remain fixed in position, sometimes for hours or even days before vanishing. Unlike the moving lights of the Caribbean and South China Sea, these Norwegian lights suggest permanent or semi-permanent installations. Local legends have long connected these lights to the hidden people or undersea folk of Norse mythology, being said to dwell in parallel worlds that occasionally intersect with our own. Modern witnesses, however, often describe these illuminated structures in technological terms, comparing them to underwater bases or submerged facilities of unknown origin. Multiple Norwegian military sonar operators have reportedly detected solid structures in the exact locations where these lights are observed, only to find nothing when submersibles are sent to investigate. By the time physical exploration is possible, both the lights and the sonar contacts have invariably disappeared. Perhaps most disturbing are the reports of underwater lights that appear to respond intelligently to human presence. Numerous accounts from divers worldwide describe encounters with luminous phenomena that seem to react to their thoughts or intentions. In one particularly unsettling case from 2010, a team of technical divers exploring a deep trench off the coast of New Zealand reported being surrounded by spheres of blue-white light that formed a perfect circle around them. According to their account, when one diver mentally challenged the lights, wondering what would happen if he swam toward them, the entire formation immediately contracted, tightening the circle. When he backed off and mentally apologized, the circle reportedly expanded again. All three divers experienced the same phenomenon, leading them to believe that whatever generated the lights could somehow sense their thoughts. The dive team abandoned the expedition shortly afterward, with two members reportedly refusing to ever dive again. These cases represent just a fraction of the unexplained luminous phenomena reported in our oceans. Are they evidence of unknown bioluminescent organisms with behaviors we don't yet understand? Secret military testing of underwater technologies? Or perhaps something even more exotic, manifestations of non-human intelligence that shares our planet but remains largely separate from human civilization? The depths hide these answers, along with countless other mysteries. Let's now turn our attention to one of the most persistent maritime legends, stories of enormous marine creatures that far exceed the size of any scientifically acknowledged species. While the giant squid and colossal squid are now recognized by science, reaching lengths of up to 43 feet and 46 feet respectively, historical accounts describe encountering marine creatures of truly monstrous proportions. The most famous of these legendary creatures is the kraken, described in Norse sagas as a tentacled beast so large it could be mistaken for an island when resting at the surface. While modern scientists typically dismiss such accounts as exaggerations of encounters with giant squid, some historical descriptions contain details that don't align with any known cephalopod species. Multiple naval records from the 16th to 19th centuries describe creatures with tentacles exceeding 100 feet in length, capable of reaching up to the highest masts of sailing ships. More tellingly, these accounts often describe features not present in giant squid, such as armored skin, multiple eyes along the tentacles themselves, and the ability to generate light from within its body. In 1861, the crew of the French gunboat Alecton reported encountering a colossal squid in the North Atlantic that they estimated to be between 50 and 70 feet long, with tentacles approximately 35 feet in diameter, far larger than any confirmed specimen. They attempted to capture the creature, but after securing a portion of its tail, the tissue tore away under its own weight, and the rest of the animal descended into the depths. The recovered tissue reportedly weighed 40 pounds, despite being a relatively small fragment of the whole creature. Witnesses described the animal as having a reddish color and a beak, the size of a man's torso, proportions that would suggest an animal far larger than even the most generous scientific estimates for known squid species. More recently, in 2003, members of the Australian Navy reported tracking an extremely large underwater contact near the Great Barrier Reef that moved with apparent intelligence, changing course when pursued. Sonar operators estimated the contact to be approximately 120–150 feet in length, with a mass suggesting something far larger than any known whale species. The contact was tracked for nearly 45 minutes before it accelerated to over 30 knots, faster than military submarines can travel, and disappeared into deeper waters. No official explanation was ever provided. and requests for the sonar recordings have been consistently denied. Could such enormous cephalopods or other marine megafauna still exist in our oceans, perhaps dwelling primarily in the lightless abyssal zones where human exploration is minimal? Even more controversial are reports of marine reptiles that seem to describe surviving plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, or other supposedly extinct species. The most famous of these is the Cadborosaurus or catty, reported frequently in the waters of the Pacific Northwest. Described as having a long neck, a horse-like head, large eyes, and a segmented serpentine body, catty has been reported by hundreds of witnesses including experienced sailors, fishermen, and even marine biologists. In 1937, a specimen allegedly matching catty's description was found in the stomach of a sperm whale processed at Naden Harbor Whaling Station in British Columbia. Photographs and tissue samples were taken, but the samples have since disappeared from scientific collections, and the photos remain the subject of intense debate among cryptozoologists and mainstream scientists. The photos show what appears to be a long-necked, finned creature with a distinctive head structure, unlike any known species, but skeptics maintain it was likely a partially digested baleen whale or basking shark. Similar creatures have been reported worldwide, from the Gloucester sea serpent of New England's coast, observed by hundreds of witnesses during a prolonged series of sightings in 1817, to the many finned sea serpents of Southeast Asian waters. These reports often come not from sensation seekers, but from experienced maritime professionals with no apparent motivation to fabricate such accounts. In 1905, two naturalists aboard the yacht Valhalla, Michael, Nicole, and E.G.B. Mead-Waldo, both fellows of the Zoological Society of London, reported observing a creature with a long neck rising approximately 6 feet out of the water near Brazil. They described it as having a turtle-like head and a dark body with 4 flippers visible just beneath the surface. As trained zoologists, they explicitly stated that the animal resembled nothing known to exist in modern oceans. Their scientific credentials and detailed report have made this one of the most credible sea serpent sightings in recorded history. Could remnant populations of marine reptiles have survived the extinction event that eliminated the dinosaurs? The oceans provide relatively stable environments compared to land, and the deepest regions experience almost no seasonal or climate variation. If a species could adapt to deep-sea living, it might conceivably survive relatively unchanged for millions of years, occasionally venturing into shallower waters where human encounters become possible. Several marine species, including the coelacanth and the frilled shark, are often described as living fossils because they've changed very little over millions of years, proving that ancient lineages can persist in ocean environments. The coelacanth itself was thought extinct for 65 million years, until a living specimen was caught in 1938, demonstrating how easily large marine species can evade scientific detection. Perhaps even more intriguing than possible surviving prehistoric creatures are reports of marine animals that don't fit any known evolutionary lineage, living or extinct. One such mystery surrounds the Ningen humanoid creatures reportedly observed by Japanese fishermen and research vessels in the waters around Antarctica. Described as being 20–30 feet long, with a human-like shape, pale white coloration, and minimal facial features except for eyes and a slit-like mouth, these creatures have allegedly been photographed and filmed multiple times since the 1990s. Witnesses describe them as having arms, legs, and 5-fingered hands, but with a lower body that sometimes appears to merge into a more traditional fish-like tail. Their movement is reported as being remarkably fluid and graceful despite their size, and they allegedly demonstrate obvious intelligence, observing human vessels with apparent curiosity before retreating into deeper waters. Japanese government researchers have reportedly collected multiple accounts from fishermen working in Antarctic waters, but these reports remain largely classified. Unofficial explanations suggest the sightings might represent misidentifications of whale carcasses, unusually shaped icebergs, or unknown species of giant rays. However, none of these explanations fully account for the reported morphology and behavior. Some more speculative researchers have suggested connections between the Ningen and ancient legends of maritime cultures worldwide that describe sea people or merfolk. These legends appear in the folklore of virtually every coastal civilization on Earth, with remarkable consistency in how these beings are described despite geographic separation. Could such widespread legends have some basis in encounters with real marine organisms, perhaps highly evolved aquatic mammals with convergent evolution toward humanoid features? Or might they represent something even more extraordinary, such as an undiscovered branch of partially aquatic hominids that evolved separately from land-dwelling humans? The oceans certainly contain enough unexplored territory and ecological niches to harbor species that would fundamentally challenge our understanding of evolution and biology. With less than 5% of the oceans thoroughly explored and mapped, our knowledge of what truly lives in the deep remains profoundly limited. New species are discovered with every major oceanographic expedition, and many of these demonstrate biological adaptations and evolutionary paths that scientists hadn't previously thought possible. As Arthur C. Clarke famously observed, two possibilities exist. Either we are alone in the universe, or we are not. Both are equally terrifying. Perhaps the same could be said of our oceans. Either they contain unknown megafauna, and possibly even non-human intelligences, or they don't. And somehow, both possibilities seem equally unsettling when you're alone on a boat, far from shore, with miles of black water stretching beneath you into unimaginable depths. Now let's explore a different category of oceanic mystery, underwater structures and ruins that shouldn't exist according to our conventional understanding of human history. The most famous of these is undoubtedly the Yonaguni Monument, located off the coast of Japan's Yonaguni Island. Discovered in 1987 by dive tour operator Kihachiro Aratake, this massive underwater structure features what appear to be terraces, straight walls, ramps, and even a stepped pyramid-like formation, all seemingly carved from a single massive piece of sandstone. The structure lies at depths between 60 and 100 feet, and spans an area roughly the size of 2 football fields. Conventional archaeology maintains that the monument is likely a natural formation, perhaps shaped by natural erosion processes acting on the region's unique striated sandstone. However, many researchers, including some respected marine geologists, have pointed to features that seem difficult to explain through natural processes alone. These include what appear to be precisely straight edges running for dozens of feet, 2 perfect right angles joining major walls of the structure, drainage channels, and even what some interpret as megaliths with carvings resembling animals and human faces. Adding to the mystery is the monument's age and location. If it is indeed an artificial structure, it would have been created when the area was above water, at least 10,000 years ago, during the last ice age when sea levels were much lower. This timeline would place its construction thousands of years before the oldest known major stone monuments like the Egyptian pyramids or Stonehenge, fundamentally challenging our understanding of prehistoric human capabilities. The site's location is also puzzling, as it sits in a region prone to catastrophic earthquakes and tsunamis, not an ideal place to invest the enormous labor required for such construction. Professor Masaaki Kimura, a marine geologist at the University of Syracuse, has studied the monument for over 20 years and remains convinced of its artificial origin. He points to what he identifies as quarry marks, stone tools found in the surrounding area, and the presence of what appear to be post holes cut into the rock, features consistent with human construction techniques. Kimura has also identified what he believes to be carved symbols on some surfaces, potentially representing an unknown form of prehistoric writing. Critics counter that all these features can be explained by natural geological processes, particularly the tendency of sandstone to fracture along straight lines and at right angles. They also note the absence of any other archaeological evidence of an advanced civilization in the region during the presumed construction period. Regardless of whether the Yonaguni Monument is natural or artificial, its existence raises profound questions. If natural, it demonstrates how geological processes can create formations that appear remarkably designed, forcing us to reconsider how we identify archaeological sites. If artificial, it would require us to dramatically revise our understanding of prehistoric human capabilities and the timeline of advanced civilization. And perhaps most intriguingly, it might represent something in between, a natural formation that was recognized and enhanced by ancient peoples, blurring the line between natural and constructed in ways our modern perspective struggles to categorize. Even more controversial are the underwater structures found near Cuba in 2001, often referred to as the Cuban underwater city, or Cuba's Atlantis. Discovered by Pauline Zalitsky and Paul Weinsweig using advanced sonar equipment while surveying the ocean floor, these structures lie at a depth of approximately 2,000 feet in the Yucatan Channel. The sonar images revealed what appeared to be a complex of geometrically arranged structures covering an area of about 2 square kilometers, including pyramids, circular buildings, and massive granite blocks in apparently deliberate alignments. Follow-up investigations using underwater robots with cameras confirmed the presence of massive stone structures with apparently straight edges and consistent angles, features typically associated with artificial construction rather than natural formation. Follow-up investigations using underwater robots with cameras confirmed the presence of massive stone structures with apparently straight edges and consistent angles, features typically associated with artificial construction rather than natural formations. Perhaps most puzzling about the Cuban site is its extreme depth. At 2,000 feet below the surface, these structures would have been constructed when sea levels were drastically lower than today, potentially over 50,000 years ago, according to some geological estimates. This timeline contradicts conventional archaeological understanding, which places the emergence of advanced stone-building civilizations at no earlier than about 7,000 years ago. Additionally, the site's location near geologically active zones raises questions about how such structures could have survived submarine earthquakes and landslides for tens of thousands of years. Despite the potentially revolutionary nature of this discovery, mainstream archaeological institutions have shown remarkably little interest in further investigation. Initial media coverage quickly faded, and requests for funding for more comprehensive explorations have been repeatedly denied. Some researchers suggest this apparent lack of interest stems from the profound implications the site would have for our understanding of human prehistory, if confirmed as artificial. Established archaeological paradigms would require fundamental revision if evidence emerged of an advanced stone-building civilization existing tens of thousands of years before such capabilities were thought possible. Others point to the extreme technical challenges of investigating structures at such depths, where conventional scuba diving is impossible and even advanced submersibles can only operate for limited periods. Manuel Iturralde, a senior researcher at Cuba's Natural History Museum, who examined the initial data, noted that it would be extremely difficult to explain these structures through known natural processes. However, he also maintained scientific caution, stating that until samples could be physically recovered and analyzed, definitive conclusions were impossible. That physical sampling has yet to occur, leaving the Cuban underwater complex in a sort of scientific limbo, too compelling to dismiss entirely, yet too challenging to investigate properly, with current resources and institutional support. The structures remain there on the dark seafloor, their true nature and origin unresolved, raising uncomfortable questions about how incomplete our understanding of human history might be. Similar underwater ruins have been reported worldwide, from the Gulf of Cambay off India's western coast to the waters around Okinawa, Japan, and the Mediterranean Sea, near Malta. In each case, the structures are found at depths that would place their construction during the last ice age or earlier, when sea levels were much lower. And in each case, mainstream archaeology has been reluctant to fully engage with the implications these sites present, if confirmed as artificial. This reluctance is perhaps understandable. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and the technical challenges of deep-water archaeology make gathering such evidence extremely difficult. But it's also possible that this institutional hesitation reflects a deeper discomfort with how such findings might disrupt established historical narratives. Human history is generally presented as a fairly linear progression, from simple hunter-gatherer societies to increasingly complex agricultural civilizations, culminating in our modern technological world. Evidence of advanced stone-building capabilities tens of thousands of years ago would suggest a much more cyclical pattern, with sophisticated civilizations rising, falling, and being forgotten long before the emergence of our currently recognized earliest cities. It would mean that human history, as we know, it might be merely the most recent chapter in a much longer and more complex story, one largely erased by rising seas at the end of the last ice age. This possibility aligns with the flood myths found in virtually every ancient culture worldwide, stories conventionally interpreted as exaggerated accounts of localized flooding events, but which might instead preserve fragmentary memories of much older, much more catastrophic global changes. Moving from potential human structures to natural formations with unusual properties, let's explore the mystery of underwater sinkholes, particularly those known as blue holes. These vertical underwater caves can reach astounding depths, creating what appear from the surface to be circles of dark blue water, amid otherwise shallow, light-colored surroundings. The most famous is the Great Blue Hole off the coast of Belize, a perfectly circular sinkhole over 400 feet deep that was explored by Jacques Cousteau in the 1970s. But while the Belize Blue Hole has been thoroughly mapped and studied, others around the world remain much more mysterious. In the South China Sea, a recently discovered blue hole named the Dragon Hole, or Longdong, reaches a confirmed depth of over 987 feet, making it the deepest known marine sinkhole on Earth. What makes these formations particularly fascinating and unsettling are the unique environmental conditions they create. As depth increases within a blue hole, oxygen levels rapidly decrease, while hydrogen sulfide levels rise, creating a toxic, almost alien environment. Yet remarkably, life still exists in these extreme conditions, often in forms found nowhere else on the planet. Microbiologists studying these environments have discovered bacteria with metabolic pathways previously unknown to science, organisms that essentially breathe sulfur compounds instead of oxygen. Some of these microbes are so genetically distinct from known life forms that they may represent an entirely separate evolutionary path, suggesting that life on Earth may have developed along multiple independent lines. More disturbing are the numerous accounts of unusual phenomena associated with certain blue holes. Local legends often describe these formations as doorways or portals, places where the normal rules of reality seem to become distorted. Divers exploring blue holes frequently report experiences of spatial disorientation that exceeds normal underwater navigation challenges. Some describe feeling as if distances expand or contract unpredictably, or experiencing brief periods where their sense of direction becomes completely scrambled despite having clear visual references. Others report more extreme perceptual anomalies, visual distortions, auditory hallucinations, and overwhelming feelings of dread or euphoria that cannot be explained by normal diving conditions, like nitrogen narcosis. The Blue Hole near Dahab, Egypt, colloquially known as the Diver's Cemetery, has claimed numerous lives over the years, many under circumstances that experienced diving instructors find difficult to explain. Several victims were highly trained technical divers who seemingly abandoned standard safety protocols for no apparent reason, swimming deeper despite having sufficient air to return to the surface. Recovery divers have reported finding victims with their equipment in perfect working order, no signs of struggle or panic, and expressions on their faces that one rescuer described as peaceful, almost blissful, like they were exactly where they wanted to be. What could compel experienced divers to swim calmly to their deaths? Is there something about the specific combination of depth, light conditions, and water chemistry in certain blue holes that can affect human cognition in ways we don't yet understand? Equally enigmatic are the reports of unusual objects found within some blue holes. During a 2014 scientific expedition to map a remote blue hole in the Bahamas, researchers deployed an underwater drone that returned footage of what appeared to be a perfectly spherical metallic object embedded in one wall of the sinkhole, approximately 180 feet below the surface. The sphere, estimated to be about 3 feet in diameter, had a smooth, apparently manufactured appearance that contrasted sharply with the rough, organic texture of the surrounding limestone. When the drone approached the object for closer inspection, it reportedly experienced complete electronic failure, reactivating only after the support team pulled it well away from the anomaly, using its tether cable. A second attempt to approach the sphere resulted in the same electronic failure, leading the research team to abandon further investigation. The footage was reportedly confiscated by unidentified government officials shortly after the expedition's return to shore, and team members were asked to sign non-disclosure agreements regarding the incident. While this particular case might be dismissed as unverifiable hearsay, it fits a pattern of reports from blue hole explorations worldwide, discoveries of anomalous objects or structures that don't appear to belong in such locations, followed by apparent suppression of information. Similar accounts have emerged from blue hole investigations in the South Pacific, the Caribbean, and the Red Sea, often involving experienced researchers with established scientific credentials who subsequently become reluctant to discuss their findings in professional contexts. This pattern of reticence among normally forthcoming scientists raises questions about what exactly is being found in these underwater formations, and why such discoveries might be considered sensitive enough to warrant confidentiality. Beyond their physical mysteries, blue holes also feature prominently in the folklore of many maritime cultures. In the Bahamas, generations of fishermen have passed down stories of blue holes as dwelling places for ocean spirits or lusca, hybrid creatures said to resemble part octopus and part shark or dragon. These entities reportedly emerge from the blue holes at dusk, dragging unwary boats and swimmers into the depths. While easily dismissed as superstition, these legends contain specific behavioral details that align remarkably well with modern scientific observations of unusual water movements around blue holes. The sudden, powerful currents that can develop as tidal patterns change, capable of dragging even large objects toward the hole's center, might well appear as the work of some massive, unseen creature to observers, without knowledge of complex hydrodynamics. In Micronesian cultures, particularly in Palau and Yap, blue holes are traditionally regarded as passages to the underworld or to parallel realms of existence. Tribal elders describe these formations as places where the barriers between worlds become thin, allowing both physical and spiritual entities to move between dimensions. Interestingly, these traditional beliefs have certain parallels with some highly speculative modern scientific theories regarding blue holes. A few fringe researchers have proposed that the unique electromagnetic properties measured in some blue holes, possibly resulting from their specific mineral compositions and water chemistry, might create localized distortions in what we perceive as linear spacetime. While mainstream physics rejects such notions, the persistence of both traditional beliefs and modern anomalous experiences centered around these formations suggests there may be aspects of blue holes that remain beyond our current scientific understanding. Whether natural formations with unusual properties or something more exotic, blue holes represent one of the ocean's most enduring mysteries. They are windows into extreme environments that exist just off familiar coastlines, yet function according to biological and chemical rules that seem alien to surface-dwelling humans. And perhaps, most disconcerting, they are formations that continue to claim human lives with disturbing regularity, sometimes under circumstances that defy conventional explanation. They remind us that the boundary between the known and unknown is not some distant frontier, but can be as close as the dark circle of water visible from a tropical beach, a vertical passage into realms where human understanding grows increasingly tenuous with each foot of descent. Let's now venture into one of the most persistent and disturbing categories of oceanic mysteries: encounters with unknown underwater vehicles, or USOs, unidentified submersible objects. Unlike their aerial counterparts, USOs receive relatively little public or media attention, yet military and commercial maritime records contain thousands of well-documented encounters spanning decades. What makes these cases particularly compelling is that underwater environments impose physical constraints that eliminate many conventional explanations. The extreme pressures of deep water, limitations on speed due to water resistance, and the technical challenges of rapid directional changes make many reported USO behaviors seemingly impossible for known human technology. One of the most thoroughly documented USO incidents occurred in 1967 when the USO Scorpion, a U.S. Navy submarine, was tracking an unknown underwater contact in the North Atlantic. According to declassified records, the Scorpion detected an object moving at speeds exceeding 150 knots at depths of over 3,000 feet, performance metrics that would crush any known submarine into imploded fragments. The Scorpion tracked this anomalous object for approximately 20 minutes before all contact with the U.S. vessel was lost. The Scorpion itself was later found on the ocean floor, its hull mysteriously crushed in what some analysts have suggested was an implosion caused by a sudden pressure change in its surrounding environment. While the Navy officially attributed this sinking to mechanical failure, several officers involved in the subsequent investigation have gone on record questioning this explanation, pointing to unusual damage patterns inconsistent with a standard hull failure. Similar incidents have been reported by the navies of the Soviet Union, Russia, France, United Kingdom, and China, often involving multiple witnesses and sensor recordings. A particularly compelling case from 1982 involved a Soviet nuclear submarine operating in the South Pacific that reportedly encountered a massive underwater object moving in geometrically perfect zigzag patterns, making 90-degree turns while maintaining speeds of approximately 60 knots. Russian naval documents declassified after the fall of the Soviet Union describe how the object came to a complete stop directly beneath the submarine, then ascended vertically until contact was made with the vessel's hull. Crew members reported hearing metallic scraping sounds and experiencing electrical system failures throughout the submarine during the several minutes of apparent physical contact. When the anomalous object finally moved away, it reportedly accelerated to over 150 knots within seconds, a rate of acceleration that would generate G-forces lethal to any human occupants. Commercial vessels have documented similar encounters, particularly in certain oceanic regions, including the Western Pacific near the Marianas Trench, sections of the North Atlantic near the Puerto Rico Trench, and the southern Indian Ocean. In 1998, a Japanese research vessel conducting a bathymetric survey near the Challenger Deep reported tracking a massive object approximately 100 meters in length that emerged from the trench and circled their ship for over an hour. Multiple crew members observed the object through the clear tropical waters, describing it as cylindrical, with no visible propulsion system, emitting a soft blue-green luminescence. The captain radioed for witnesses, and a passing commercial airliner diverted slightly, with the flight crew confirming the sighting from their elevated perspective. The object eventually descended vertically, at an estimated speed of 120 knots, faster than a military torpedo, and returned to the extreme depths from which it had emerged. What makes USO reports particularly disturbing is their frequent association with electromagnetic effects that suggest technologies well beyond current human capabilities. Witnesses consistently report compass malfunctions, radar disruptions, radiostatic, power fluctuations, and even total electrical failures in vessels near these objects. These electromagnetic effects sometimes persist for days afterward, with equipment functioning normally only after moving well away from the encounter location. Some military analysts have suggested these characteristics indicate sophisticated technological systems designed to manipulate fundamental physical forces, capabilities that would represent a quantum leap beyond current human engineering. More controversial are the reported biological effects experienced by witnesses to close USO encounters. These include unusual sensory phenomena such as metallic tastes, unexplained skin rashes or burns, temporary sensory impairments, and even long-term medical conditions that emerge days or weeks after the incidents. A study conducted privately by former Soviet naval medical officers documented consistent patterns of symptoms among submarine crew members involved in USO encounters between 1960 and 1990. These included disrupted sleep patterns, unusual dreams, specifically involving water or submersion themes, temporary cognitive impairments affecting mathematical ability and spatial reasoning, and in some cases, the development of rare cancers at rates significantly above statistical norms. While this research remains outside mainstream medical literature, the consistency of reported symptoms across multiple navies and decades of incidents suggests these biological effects may be more than psychosomatic responses to unusual experiences. Perhaps most unsettling are the patterns that emerge when mapping USO encounters globally over time. When plotted, these incidents show distinct clustering around specific deep ocean features, particularly trenches, underwater mountain ranges, and certain seamounts with unusual geological compositions. Some of these locations have documented histories of USO activity stretching back centuries, appearing in ship logs from the age of exploration, and even in the maritime folklore of ancient civilizations. The waters near Nan Madol, an ancient stone city built on artificial islands in Micronesia, have reports of underwater lights and ships that sail beneath the waves, dating back to pre-colonial accounts, with modern naval vessels continuing to document anomalous underwater contacts in the exact same region. This historical consistency suggests that whatever these phenomena represent, they are not recent developments, but may have been present throughout human maritime history, interpreted through the cultural frameworks of each period. Adding another dimension to the USO mystery is their apparent relationship with aerial phenomena. Numerous cases document objects transitioning between air and water with no reduction in speed, a physical impossibility for conventional aircraft or submarines due to the dramatically different densities of the two mediums. In 1992, a United States aircraft carrier battle group in the North Pacific reportedly tracked an object on radar that descended from approximately 70,000 feet altitude, entered the ocean without slowing, and continued to be tracked on sonar as it descended to a depth of over 27,000 feet, a depth that would crush any known submersible. The entire sequence reportedly occurred in less than 3 minutes, representing velocities and pressure adaptations far beyond acknowledged human technology. Similar transmedium events have been documented by multiple navies, often with hundreds of military witnesses and various sensor recordings that remain largely classified. What are we to make of these persistent reports from credible maritime sources? The conventional explanations, ranging from misidentified natural phenomena to classified military testing, struggle to account for capabilities consistently reported for decades before such technologies could plausibly have been developed by human agencies. Some researchers have proposed that these objects might represent non-human technology, whether extraterrestrial or from some undiscovered terrestrial civilization that evolved separately in the ocean depths. Others suggest they might be manifestations of natural phenomena we don't yet understand, perhaps related to plasma formations or emergent behaviors of electromagnetic fields in certain geological contexts. Whatever their true nature, USOs represent one of the most well-documented yet least publicly discussed ocean mysteries, with significant implications for our understanding of what exists in our waters and potentially for national security worldwide. Let's now explore another category of ocean mystery: inexplicable changes to water itself, specifically reports of localized areas where seawater temporarily exhibits properties that defy standard physics and chemistry. Among the most documented of these anomalies are what sailors have traditionally called dead water or sticky water, patches of ocean where ships suddenly lose momentum and maneuverability for no apparent reason. While some cases of dead water have been explained by density variations creating internal waves that drain energy from a vessel's movement, other incidents describe effects far more extreme than this mechanism can explain. In these more dramatic cases, witnesses report water with unusual viscosity, sometimes described as having the consistency of gelatin or oil, that persists for hours or even days before returning to normal fluidity. One particularly well-documented case occurred in 1978, when a research vessel operated by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution encountered what the scientific crew described as highly anomalous water conditions, approximately 200 miles east of Bermuda. The vessel, conducting routine oceanographic sampling, suddenly experienced a 70% reduction in speed despite maintaining full engine power. The scientific team, initially suspecting mechanical failure, discovered that their sampling equipment was meeting unusual resistance when lowered into the water. Visual observations described the ocean surface as having an oily, almost gelatinous appearance, despite chemical analysis showing no petroleum contamination or unusual biological material that might explain the changed properties. Most puzzling was the clearly defined boundary of the phenomenon. The affected area had a nearly perfect circular shape approximately 1 nautical mile in diameter, with normal ocean conditions just beyond this perimeter. The vessel remained trapped within this anomalous zone for nearly 9 hours before the water properties gradually normalized. During this period, multiple samples were collected and later analyzed at Woods Hole's laboratories. The results reportedly showed water with molecular hydrogen bonds significantly stronger than those found in normal seawater, creating a more structured arrangement of water molecules that increased viscosity and density. How such a fundamental change to water's chemical properties could occur in an isolated area of open ocean, persist for hours, and then revert to normal remains unexplained. The incident report was filed with relevant oceanographic databases, but received little attention outside specialized scientific circles. Similar water anomalies have been reported in specific regions worldwide, particularly in the North Atlantic's eastern boundary, parts of the Baltic Sea, and the waters surrounding certain volcanic islands in the Pacific. Local maritime communities often have traditional knowledge about these phenomena, with specific locations known for occasionally manifesting heavy seas or ghost water that experienced captains carefully avoid. These cultural warnings sometimes date back centuries, suggesting the phenomena have occurred consistently throughout recorded history, rather than being linked to modern factors like pollution or climate change. Even more extreme are rare reports of water temporarily exhibiting properties that seem to violate fundamental physical laws. In 2003, a commercial fishing vessel, operating near the Kuril Islands in the Northwest Pacific, documented a circular area approximately 120 feet in diameter, where seawater appeared to be flowing upward against gravity. Video footage showed small objects placed in this area being lifted several inches above the ocean surface before falling back down, while water itself seemed to form small columns rising into the air before collapsing. The phenomenon lasted approximately 40 minutes before dissipating, with the crew reporting unusual static, electricity effects, and equipment malfunctions throughout the event. Scientific analysis of the footage and accompanying witness statements has offered no conclusive explanation, though some researchers have proposed connections to underwater electromagnetic anomalies potentially linked to geological features of the Kuril Trench. What makes these water anomalies particularly significant is their implication that even our most fundamental understanding of how matter behaves may have exceptions under certain conditions. Water is arguably the most studied substance on Earth, its properties documented in countless scientific papers and considered well established. Yet these persistent reports from credible maritime sources suggest there may be conditions under which even this most familiar of substances can temporarily behave in ways our current scientific models cannot adequately explain. If water itself can occasionally defy our understanding of physics and chemistry, what other assumptions about our world might similarly have exceptions we haven't yet cataloged or comprehended? Let's shift our focus to another profound ocean mystery: reports of temporary localized failures of the Earth's gravitational field above certain deep water locations. While gravity anomalies caused by variations in the Earth's mass distribution are well documented by geophysicists, these subtle variations typically alter gravitational measurements by fractions of a percent. Far more puzzling are accounts from maritime sources describing dramatic gravitational anomalies that briefly affect everything within a defined area of ocean. Most scientific institutions dismiss such reports as observational errors or misinterpretations of other phenomena, yet their persistence across decades and their documentation by trained observers raise uncomfortable questions about gaps in our understanding of fundamental forces. Among the most thoroughly documented cases is an incident from 1985 involving a Soviet oceanographic vessel conducting deep-water research near the Vityaz, deep in the Marianas Trench. According to reports later declassified after the Soviet Union's collapse, the ship experienced what was described as a localized gravitational anomaly lasting approximately 8 minutes. During this period, unsecured objects reportedly rose from surfaces and floated within the ship's laboratory spaces. Water in containers formed perfect spheres characteristic of zero-gravity environments, and crew members reported sensations of lightness and disorientation. The ship's scientific team, which included a physicist specializing in gravitational mechanics, recorded measurements showing an apparent reduction in gravitational force of approximately 64% compared to normal values. The effect reportedly terminated as suddenly as it began, with no recurrence during the remainder of the expedition despite continued monitoring. Similar incidents have been reported by other research vessels, particularly those operating in regions with extreme ocean depths or unusual geological features. In 1998, a French oceanographic expedition in the Puerto Rico Trench documented equipment and small objects briefly rising from surfaces during a period when their gravitational sensors registered anomalous readings. The research team attributed the event to equipment malfunction until they reviewed video footage, clearly showing securely mounted instruments detaching from their moorings and floating freely for approximately 40 seconds before normal gravitational conditions returned. The French government has never released the complete dataset from this expedition, citing only anomalous environmental readings requiring further analysis. Commercial vessels have reported comparable phenomena, though typically with less precise documentation than research ships equipped with scientific instruments. These accounts often describe brief periods where the vessel itself seemed to rise slightly in the water, beyond what could be explained by normal wave action, accompanied by sensations that crew members compared to the feeling of an elevator descending too quickly. Such reports frequently come from regions overlying major tectonic boundaries, particularly areas where deep ocean trenches mark subduction zones in the Earth's crust. Conventional scientific explanations for these reported gravitational anomalies have included instrument errors, unique atmospheric conditions affecting pressure sensors, or even mass hallucinations triggered by environmental factors such as low-frequency sound or unusual electromagnetic fields. Yet none of these explanations adequately account for simultaneous instrumental readings, physical effects on inanimate objects, and consistent witness reports from unconnected incidents across different oceans and decades. Some theoretical physicists have proposed more exotic explanations, suggesting that certain geological configurations might occasionally generate temporary distortions in spacetime that manifest as gravitational anomalies. Others have speculated about possible connections to theoretical dark matter concentrations or other cosmological factors currently beyond our detection capabilities. Perhaps most intriguing is the apparent correlation between locations of reported gravitational anomalies and other oceanic mysteries. Many of the same deep ocean regions associated with USO sightings, electromagnetic anomalies, and unusual acoustic phenomena also appear in gravitational anomaly reports. This clustering suggests possible connections between seemingly separate mystery categories, perhaps different manifestations of the same underlying phenomenon, or different perceptual interpretations of a common cause that remains unidentified. Whatever their true explanation, these reported gravitational anomalies represent a profound challenge to our understanding of how consistently fundamental physical forces operate across Earth's environments. Let's now explore one of the ocean's most persistent visual enigmas, reports of underwater lights and structures that appear and disappear without explanation. Unlike bioluminescent organisms whose light production is well understood by marine biologists, these phenomena exhibit patterns and behaviors that suggest either undocumented natural processes or something more extraordinary. What makes these cases particularly compelling is their consistent documentation by multiple independent witnesses, often including experienced mariners, military personnel, and scientific researchers, with no apparent motivation to fabricate such accounts. The Bay of Bengal has been a hotspot for such sightings for centuries, with local fishing communities having extensive traditional knowledge about what they call ghost lights or sea spirits. These are described as blue-green luminous formations that move with apparent intelligence, sometimes following boats, other times appearing to react when observed. Unlike the chaotic movements of bioluminescent marine life, witnesses describe these lights, moving in geometrically precise patterns, perfect circles, straight lines, and triangular formations that maintain their structure despite ocean currents. Commercial shipping crews transiting the region have reported similar phenomena, often documenting them in official logs with entries describing unexplained luminous phenomena, not consistent with known marine bioluminescence. In 1992, a joint Indian-Russian oceanographic expedition specifically investigating these reports captured video footage of multiple light formations at depths estimated between 200 and 300 feet. The lights appeared to move independently against prevailing currents, maintained fixed geometric relationships with each other, and responded to the expedition's underwater lights by changing formation. Analysis of the footage ruled out reflections, equipment artifacts, or known bioluminescent organisms, with researchers concluding that the phenomena represented an unknown form of energy manifestation requiring further study. Despite this recommendation, no follow-up scientific expedition has been publicly acknowledged, and the original research team reported difficulty securing funding for continued investigation. Similar light phenomena have been documented in the waters off southeastern Japan, particularly near Yonaguni Island, site of the previously discussed underwater monument. Local divers have collected hundreds of photographs and video recordings of what they describe as organized light formations that periodically appear in the waters surrounding the monument. Unlike random light patterns that might result from camera artifacts or water refraction, these formations reportedly maintain consistent structures across multiple observation events and different recording equipment. Particularly notable are accounts of these lights intensifying dramatically during minor earthquake activity in the region, suggesting possible connections to geological processes or electromagnetic fields generated by tectonic movements. Even more puzzling are reports of what appear to be temporary underwater structures composed entirely of light. In 2008, the crew of a Chilean naval vessel conducting routine patrols off the southern coast documented what they described as a geometric luminous construction, visible at approximately 100 feet depth in otherwise clear water. The formation, estimated to be roughly 200 feet in diameter, had the appearance of an architectural structure with defined walls and corridors composed entirely of steady blue-white light. Unlike the moving light formations reported in other cases, this phenomenon remained stationary for the nearly 4 hours it was observed before fading gradually from view. The Chilean Navy has classified much of the documentation from this incident, though several crew members have provided consistent accounts to researchers, including rough sketches showing a structure resembling ancient step pyramids with interconnecting passageways. Attempts to explain these phenomena through conventional science have focused on potential natural mechanisms, including hypothesized forms of light-producing bacterial colonies, unusual interactions between bioluminescent organisms, and electrical fields generated by geological features, or previously undocumented forms of natural plasma formations, similar to ball lightning but adapted to underwater environments. Yet these explanations struggle to account for the reported complexity, persistence, and apparently responsive behaviors of the phenomena. Some researchers have reluctantly considered more exotic possibilities, including the concept that these light formations might represent a form of organized energy manifestation with properties beyond our current scientific understanding, essentially, a previously unrecognized form of semi-physical phenomenon that exists at the boundary between energy and matter. What makes these underwater light mysteries particularly significant is their potential connection to similar phenomena reported in atmospheric and even space environments. Structured light formations with geometric patterns and apparent responsive behaviors have been documented by astronauts aboard the International Space Station, high-altitude military pilots, and ground-based observers worldwide. The similarities between these observations across different environmental mediums suggest possible commonalities and underlying mechanisms, whatever they might be. If these diverse phenomena do share common causes, the underwater manifestations may offer unique research advantages, occurring in more accessible and confined environments than their atmospheric or space counterparts. Yet despite this potential scientific value, mainstream institutional research into these underwater light phenomena remains minimal. Individual researchers pursuing the topic often report difficulty securing funding or institutional support, and military documentation of incidents frequently remains classified decades after the original observations. This reluctance to engage scientifically with well-documented but unexplained phenomena represents a curious blind spot in marine research, one that may reflect discomfort with observations that resist categorization within established theoretical frameworks. The lights continue to appear in our oceans, structured and seemingly responsive, yet largely uninvestigated by the very scientific institutions established to explore the unknown. Let's turn our attention now to one of the most unsettling categories of ocean mystery, what maritime communities worldwide have traditionally called ghost ships or phantom vessels. Far from being merely historical curiosities or the stuff of maritime legends, modern documented cases of ships found completely abandoned under inexplicable circumstances continue to occur with disturbing regularity. These contemporary ghost ships share many characteristics with their historical counterparts, including the absence of crew, despite evidence suggesting the vessel was operating normally until moments before abandonment, lack of obvious environmental dangers that would necessitate evacuation, and the presence of half-completed routine activities suggesting sudden and unplanned departure. One of the most thoroughly documented modern cases is that of the GN Singh, a large tanker discovered drifting in Australian waters in 2006. The vessel was found completely deserted, but in good mechanical condition, with its engines functional, adequate fuel reserves, and no signs of piracy, fire, or other catastrophic events. Food was found laid out in the galley, as if for a meal that was never eaten. Personal belongings remained in crew quarters, and the ship's logbook showed no entries indicating distress or planned abandonment. Most puzzling was the complete absence of any identifying documentation. The vessel carried no registration papers, and its name had been painted over, though still faintly visible. Extensive international investigation failed to determine the ship's origins, ownership, or the fate of its crew, and it remains officially classified as an unattributed maritime anomaly in Lloyd's shipping database. Even more disturbing was the 2007 case of the Taiching 21, a Taiwanese fishing vessel found abandoned in the Pacific Ocean with its entire crew of 29 missing. Unlike many ghost ship cases where vessels are found intact, the Taiching 21 showed evidence of a desperate situation. 3 life rafts were missing, suggesting a deliberate evacuation, yet the ship itself was in excellent condition, with no mechanical failures, fire damage, or weather damage that would explain abandonment. The ship's emergency locator beacon had never been activated, no distress calls were received, and the last routine communication with shore gave no indication of any problems. Most perplexing were bloodstains found on the deck that forensic analysis determined came from at least 4 different individuals, yet there were no signs of struggle, no weapons found, and no evidence of piracy or criminal activity. Despite one of the most extensive maritime searches in Pacific history, no trace of the missing crew or the 3 lifeboats was ever found. These contemporary cases echo historical mysteries, like the Mary Celeste, found sailing unmanned in the Atlantic in 1872, with its cargo intact, the crew's personal belongings undisturbed, and 6 months' worth of food and water still aboard. The captain's navigational instruments and ship's papers were missing, but the valuable cargo remained untouched, ruling out typical piracy. What could compel an entire crew to abandon a perfectly seaworthy vessel in open ocean, a decision almost certainly leading to death, while leaving their personal possessions behind? And why do these inexplicable abandonments continue to occur in the age of instant satellite communication, emergency beacons, and global positioning systems? One disturbing pattern that emerges when analyzing ghost ship incidents across centuries is their geographic clustering. Certain ocean regions appear to generate disproportionate numbers of these cases, particularly the area between the Azores and Gibraltar in the Atlantic, the waters east of Japan in the Pacific, and the western Indian Ocean near the Maldives. These regions don't share obvious environmental characteristics that would explain common dangers to shipping, yet they consistently appear in ghost ship reports from both historical records and modern incident databases. Some researchers have noted that these high incidence zones overlap significantly with areas known for other maritime anomalies, including reported gravitational irregularities, unusual electromagnetic effects, and unexplained instrument malfunctions. Various theories have been proposed to explain ghost ship incidents, ranging from the conventional to the exotic. Practical explanations include catastrophic gas releases from cargo that could asphyxiate crews before they realize the danger, rogue waves that might sweep crews overboard while leaving vessels relatively intact, or even coordinated pirate actions designed to hijack crew members while leaving ships adrift to obscure responsibility. Yet many documented cases contain elements that resist these explanations. Vessels found with hatches securely battened against weather, indicating deliberate preparation before abandonment. Ships discovered in calm seas, far from known pirate territories, or abandonment patterns suggesting coordinated evacuation during apparently normal operating conditions. More controversial explanations involve potential environmental factors not currently recognized by conventional science. These include theorized spatial-temporal anomalies that might briefly affect specific ocean regions, unusual atmospheric or oceanic conditions that could induce extreme psychological responses in crew members, or currently unidentified phenomena that might render ocean environments briefly but acutely hostile to human life, while leaving physical structures undamaged. Such explanations remain highly speculative, yet the consistent patterns across ghost ship incidents spanning centuries and global locations suggest underlying causal factors that transcend specific crew behaviors, ship types, or historical periods. Perhaps most unsettling are reports from the small percentage of ghost ships that have been fully investigated yet remain completely unexplained by maritime authorities. In approximately 7% of abandoned vessel cases from the past 50 years, official investigations have concluded, with some variation of cause of abandonment cannot be determined. These unexplained cases often share disturbing commonalities, evidence suggesting extremely rapid evacuation, absence of communication despite functional equipment, and abandonment occurring in favorable weather conditions, with no apparent external threats. They represent a persistent reminder that despite our technological advancement and presumed mastery over maritime environments, the oceans still occasionally manifest phenomena that force human beings to flee seaworthy vessels, for reasons they either cannot or do not have time to communicate. The mystery of ghost ships touches something primal in human psychology, the fear not of dramatic disaster, but of encountering something so utterly outside our conceptual framework that abandonment becomes the only response. These vessels drift silently across our oceans as floating question marks, challenging our assumption that with sufficient technology and knowledge, we can render the seas predictable and safe. They suggest boundaries to human understanding that we are reluctant to acknowledge, places where our models of reality meet phenomena they cannot incorporate or explain. And perhaps most disturbingly, they hint at dangers that leave no witnesses, no explanations, and no bodies. Only empty ships that continue their journeys with cargo and provisions intact, but stripped of all human presence. Let's now explore an oceanic mystery that combines aspects of unusual phenomena with potentially serious consequences for global navigation. The documented existence of magnetic anomaly zones where compass readings become unreliable or wildly inaccurate. While localized magnetic variations are a known and mapped feature of Earth's geomagnetic field, certain ocean regions exhibit magnetic behaviors that defy conventional geophysical explanations and appear to change over time in ways that cannot be predicted by current models. These anomaly zones represent more than academic curiosities. They pose genuine navigational hazards in regions where electronic systems fail and backup magnetic compasses become unreliable, potentially contributing to maritime accidents and disappearances that might otherwise be attributed to human error. One of the most extensively documented magnetic anomaly zones lies in the South Atlantic between South America and Africa, in a region oceanographers refer to as the South Atlantic Anomaly. This vast area is known for weakening the Earth's magnetic field to approximately 30% of its expected strength, creating problems for orbiting satellites and aircraft. However, within this larger region, maritime reports have identified smaller hotspots where magnetic compass deviations of up to 90 degrees have been recorded, essentially rendering compasses useless for navigation. Unlike the broader anomaly, which is relatively stable and well mapped, these localized hotspots appear to move unpredictably, appearing in new locations and disappearing from previously affected areas without apparent pattern. In 2010, a research vessel specifically investigating these mobile magnetic anomalies deployed an array of 25 highly sensitive magnetometers in a grid pattern across one such hotspot near the St. Helena Basin. The results were so unusual that 3 independent laboratories were asked to verify the equipment calibration before the findings were accepted. The data showed what researchers described as a magnetic vortex, a spiraling pattern in the magnetic field that appeared to rotate over time, causing compass needles within the affected area to spin continuously rather than maintaining fixed orientation. More puzzling, the center of this vortex moved approximately 1.7 miles during the 72-hour observation period, maintaining its internal structure while traversing the ocean floor below. Conventional geophysical models cannot explain magnetic field structures that maintain coherence while moving independently of the underlying geology that supposedly generates them. Similar magnetic anomaly zones have been documented in the Western Pacific near the Mariana Trench, portions of the Indian Ocean near the 90 East Ridge, and in Arctic waters near the Gacko Ridge. Commercial shipping utilizing these routes has developed protocols for magnetic anomaly zones, including switching to alternative navigation methods and reporting anomalous compass behavior to maritime authorities. Yet despite the practical significance of these anomalies for navigation safety, mainstream geophysical research has largely avoided comprehensive investigation of the phenomena, focusing instead on broader, more stable aspects of Earth's magnetic field that better fit existing theoretical models. What makes these magnetic anomalies particularly significant as ocean mysteries is their potential connection to other, unexplained maritime phenomena. Researchers mapping the locations of historical shipping losses, modern navigational incidents, and reported electronic equipment failures have noted statistically significant clustering around documented magnetic anomaly zones. The famous Bermuda Triangle region, long associated with navigational confusion and shipping losses, overlaps with an area where the Earth's magnetic field intersects with the North American continental shelf in complex ways that create documented compass variation problems. Similar correlations appear in the Dragon's Triangle region of the Western Pacific and in waters surrounding the Maldives and the Indian Ocean, all areas with both documented magnetic anomalies and histories of unexplained maritime incidents. Various theories have been proposed to explain these mobile magnetic anomalies, ranging from conventional to highly speculative. Some geophysicists suggest they might result from interaction between Earth's magnetic field and deep ocean currents carrying charged particles, essentially creating moving electromagnetic effects through principles similar to those used in electrical generators. Others propose connections to thermomagnetic properties of certain deep-sea mineral deposits, which might temporarily change their magnetic characteristics due to subtle temperature variations in ocean currents. More controversial hypotheses involve concepts like localized plasma formations in ocean environments, or even speculative ideas about temporary quantum-level fluctuations in the fundamental magnetic properties of seawater under certain conditions. Whatever their cause, these magnetic anomaly zones represent another category of ocean mystery, where practical effects on human activities are well documented, yet satisfying scientific explanations remain elusive. They challenge our understanding of how consistently natural laws operate across Earth's environments, and suggest that even seemingly fundamental and reliable tools like magnetic compasses may sometimes encounter oceanic phenomena beyond their capacity to function reliably. In a world increasingly dependent on electronic navigation systems that ultimately rely on magnetic field mapping for their foundational calibration, these anomalies raise disturbing questions about whether we truly understand the magnetic environment of our own planet as thoroughly as we believe. Moving from physical anomalies to biological mysteries, let's explore one of the most persistent and widespread ocean legends, reports of marine creatures that seem to bridge the gap between recognized animals and something approaching sentience or organized society. Throughout human history, maritime cultures worldwide have maintained traditions describing encounters with ocean-dwelling entities that display behaviors suggesting intelligence, culture, or even technological capabilities. While easily dismissed as superstition or misidentification, the consistency of these accounts across geographically separated cultures, their persistence despite modern scientific education, and their occasional documentation by credible contemporary witnesses raises uncomfortable questions about potential gaps in our understanding of marine biology and animal cognition. Among the most extensively documented cases are the traditions of Pacific Islander cultures regarding what they call ocean people, or those who breathe water. These are consistently described not as mythological mermaids or fish-human hybrids, but as apparently non-human marine organisms possessing social organization, tool use, and what some anthropologists have reluctantly termed architecture, the deliberate arrangement of underwater materials to create persistent structures for specific purposes. Multiple Polynesian, Micronesian, and Melanesian cultures maintained elaborate protocols for interacting with these entities, including specific offerings, communication attempts through patterns of stone placement, and strict avoidance of certain underwater locations described as their cities or dwelling places. What makes these traditional accounts difficult to dismiss entirely is their occasional corroboration by modern observers with scientific training. In 1997, a marine biologist conducting coral reef surveys near Chuuk, formerly Truk, documented what he described as deliberate arrangement of coral fragments in geometric patterns at depths of approximately 80 feet. The formations, consisting of pieces of branching coral sorted by size and color, were arranged in precise concentric circles spanning approximately 30 feet in diameter. Local fishermen identified these as markers created by the ocean people to delineate territorial boundaries, a practice described in traditional knowledge, but never previously documented by scientists. When the research team returned 3 days later to place underwater cameras, they found the entire formation had been dismantled and the materials dispersed, with no storm activity or other environmental factors that could explain the rapid, thorough disassembly. Similar accounts have emerged from scientific expeditions elsewhere in the Pacific and Indian Oceans, often from researchers who express reluctance to formally report their observations due to concern for professional reputation. These accounts typically describe either unexplained manipulation of natural materials in deep-water environments or brief observations of unidentified marine organisms, displaying behavior patterns far more complex than any documented species. One recurring description involves apparent tool use, organisms manipulating objects in ways that serve no obvious feeding or defensive purpose, but appear to modify the environment deliberately. Other reports describe coordinated group behaviors that suggest communication and social organization beyond that known in recognized marine species. Perhaps most intriguing are the deep water structures documented near certain seamounts and underwater mountain ranges that local traditions specifically associate with these ocean people. In 2012, an oceanographic expedition mapping previously uncharted seamounts near the Solomon Islands discovered unusual formations at depths between 100 and 150 feet that defied easy categorization as either natural or artificial. These structures consisted of coral and stone arrangements with characteristics suggesting deliberate placement, consistent spacing, orientation toward specific compass directions, and incorporation of materials not naturally occurring in the immediate vicinity. The scientific team initially hypothesized that the formations might represent previously undocumented human activity, perhaps ancient ceremonial sites that were subsequently submerged by rising sea levels. However, radiocarbon dating of the coral components indicated that the structures had been assembled and modified continuously over several hundred years, with the most recent modifications occurring approximately 15 to 20 years before discovery. This timeline eliminates conventional human activity as an explanation, as the depths involved exceed those accessible to traditional breath-hold diving, and the locations had no documented visitation by modern diving equipment before the expedition. Local traditional knowledge, however, identified the site as one of several gathering places of the sea people described in oral histories, dating back multiple generations. When underwater cameras were placed to monitor the location, 2 units recorded what the technical report described only as unexplained interference before ceasing function entirely. A third camera, recovered 6 months later, contained footage showing the apparent rearrangement of several stone components within the structure, despite no human visitation during the monitoring period. Conventional scientific explanations for these phenomena have focused on the potential for undocumented behavior in known marine species, particularly octopuses and certain dolphin species known for environmental manipulation and complex social behavior. Some marine biologists have proposed that these observations might represent previously unrecognized aspects of known species' behavioral repertoires, perhaps territorial marking or mating displays with cultural components that vary between populations. Others suggest the possibility of coordinated behavior between multiple species, symbiotic relationships creating effects that appear more complex than any single species could accomplish alone. Yet these explanations struggle to account for the scale, precision, and apparent purpose evident in some documented cases. The recognized cognitive capabilities of even the most intelligent marine species seem insufficient to explain structures with consistent geometric patterns maintained over generations, or the deliberate collection and transportation of materials from distant locations to specific construction sites. These behaviors suggest levels of planning, abstract thought, and cultural transmission more typically associated with human activity than with even the most cognitively advanced non-human species currently acknowledged by science. This has led some researchers to cautiously propose more controversial hypotheses, including the possibility that our oceans might harbor marine species with cognitive and social capabilities approaching or paralleling those of terrestrial humans, but manifesting through fundamentally different evolutionary pathways adapted to aquatic environments. Such species might remain largely undetected by conventional scientific observation due to deep water habitation, deliberate avoidance of human contact, or cognitive patterns, so different from our own that we struggle to recognize their manifestations as evidence of intelligence. This possibility, while highly speculative by current scientific standards, aligns with persistent traditions from maritime cultures worldwide that describe encountering non-human intelligences in ocean environments. From Greek accounts of Triton cities to Japanese traditions regarding yumabozu, sea monks who construct underwater shrines, to Polynesian descriptions of reef people who maintain territories and social hierarchies, human cultures with extensive ocean contact have consistently reported interactions with apparently sentient marine entities, distinct from recognized animal species. The question remains whether these traditions represent cultural interpretations of misidentified natural phenomena, as conventional anthropology generally assumes, or whether they might contain kernels of observation about genuine marine organisms or communities that exist beyond current scientific classification. Moving from biological mysteries to geological enigmas, let's explore what oceanographers sometimes call transient seafloor features, underwater structures that appear, change, or disappear at rates that cannot be explained by known geological processes. While the ocean floor constantly changes through volcanic activity, landslides, erosion, and sedimentation, these documented anomalies occur at speeds or in patterns that contradict established understanding of submarine geology. They represent another category of ocean mystery, where the boundary between the known and unknown remains surprisingly fluid, even in the age of sophisticated sonar mapping and underwater observation. One of the most thoroughly documented cases involves what researchers named the Barents Sea structure, first mapped by Norwegian Petroleum Exploration Surveys in 1998. Initial sonar mapping identified what appeared to be a perfectly circular depression, approximately 800 feet in diameter, with a raised central platform resembling a giant bullseye on the seafloor at a depth of approximately 1,100 feet. The structure's precise geometry immediately attracted scientific attention, as such perfect circularity is rare in natural formations. A follow-up survey conducted 16 months later revealed that the entire structure had disappeared completely, with the seafloor returning to the flat, featureless topography typical of the surrounding area. No seismic activity, volcanic eruptions, or unusual current patterns had been recorded in the region during the intervening period that could explain such rapid and complete restructuring of a massive seafloor feature. Similar transient structures have been documented in the Gulf of Mexico, portions of the Mediterranean Sea near Cyprus, and the Western Pacific near Guam. In each case, sonar mapping revealed geometrically precise formations that appeared between survey missions, remained present for periods ranging from months to years, and then disappeared without apparent cause or physical residue. These documented changes challenge conventional understanding of seafloor geology, which generally operates on timescales of decades to millennia rather than months. The precision and complexity of some formations, including perfect circles, intersecting straight lines, and in one case near Guam, a series of equally spaced parallel ridges resembling an enormous ladder on the seafloor, further complicate attempts to explain them through known natural processes. Various explanations have been proposed for these transient structures, ranging from conventional scientific hypotheses to more speculative possibilities. Some geologists suggest they might result from previously undocumented interactions between gas hydrates and seafloor sediments, creating temporary formations when methane or other gases are released from subsurface deposits. Others propose connections to little understood electromagnetic phenomena associated with certain mineral compositions in seafloor rocks, potentially creating temporary alterations in sediment distribution through electrostatic effects. More exotic suggestions include the possibility of biological agency, perhaps unknown deep-sea organisms that construct and later dismantle large-scale structures for reproductive or other purposes, similar to but vastly larger than the nests and mounds created by certain fish species. The most controversial theories propose potential connections to USO phenomena discussed earlier, suggesting these transient structures might represent evidence of non-human activity on the ocean floor, perhaps temporary installations for purposes we don't understand, or physical artifacts of energy technologies beyond current scientific classification. While such explanations remain far outside mainstream geological thinking, the documented reality of these rapidly changing, geometrically precise seafloor features continues to resist fully satisfying explanation through conventional mechanisms. They represent another category of ocean mystery, where observation and established theory have yet to achieve comfortable alignment. Perhaps the most profound ocean mysteries are those that challenge not just specific scientific disciplines, but our broader understanding of how reality itself operates. Among these are documented cases of what some researchers have termed temporal anomalies, incidents where time itself appears to function differently in certain marine environments or under specific oceanic conditions. While easily dismissed as subjective perception or equipment malfunction, some of these cases involve multiple independent witnesses, instrument recordings, and physical evidence that resists conventional explanation. One of the most thoroughly documented temporal anomalies occurred in 1992 when a research vessel operated by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution was conducting deep water studies in the Puerto Rico Trench. The ship maintained continuous radio contact with its base station at scheduled 30-minute intervals throughout the 3-week expedition. During one 72-hour period, the vessel's crew reported experiencing normal time passage, conducting routine operations, and making their scheduled radio check-ins. However, base station records showed that no communications were received during this period, with the vessel seemingly missing for 3 days before contact resumed. When the ship returned to port, the crew was shocked to discover the discrepancy. From their perspective, no communications had been missed, and all scheduled check-ins had occurred normally. The ship's chronometers and computer timestamps confirmed their experience, showing continuous normal operation without interruption. Yet shore-based records unambiguously documented a 72-hour period of complete silence, during which multiple search aircraft were dispatched but failed to locate the vessel despite favorable weather and visibility. Most puzzling were the ship's navigational logs, which showed the vessel covering approximately 440 miles during the 72-hour period, an average speed of just over 6 knots, consistent with its normal cruising operations and fuel consumption. Yet the ship's actual position upon re-establishing contact would have required traveling over 1,200 miles from its last confirmed location, a distance impossible at its documented speed. The scientific team extensively analyzed all available data but reached no conclusive explanation for the discrepancy. The event remains classified in Woods Hole records as an unresolved temporal spatial incident, with most technical details restricted from public access. Several crew members reportedly requested reassignment following the expedition, with one navigator permanently leaving oceanographic work despite having over 15 years of previous experience. When questioned years later about the incident, he would say only that the experience had demonstrated time isn't what we think it is, especially out there over the deep trenches. Similar temporal anomalies have been reported by both military and commercial vessels operating in specific ocean regions, particularly over extreme depths or near certain underwater geological features. These accounts typically describe one of 3 patterns: time appearing to pass at different rates for vessels compared to shore-based observers, experiences of missing time, where crews have no memory of periods ranging from minutes to hours while their vessels continue on course, or more rarely, what some researchers have termed temporal slippage brief periods, where observers report experiencing events apparently out of sequence, such as seeing weather conditions or ocean phenomena before they actually occur. Most mainstream scientists attribute these reports to psychological factors, equipment malfunctions, or misinterpretation of conventional phenomena. Suggested explanations include the disorienting effects of extended ocean travel on human perception, potential hallucinogenic effects of certain marine microorganisms that might be ingested through ship water systems, or even low-frequency acoustic resonance from underwater geological features affecting brain function and time perception. Yet these explanations struggle to account for cases involving multiple independent observers, instrument recordings that corroborate unusual experiences, and physical displacements of vessels that cannot be reconciled with normal navigation and propulsion capabilities. Some theoretical physicists have reluctantly proposed more exotic possibilities, including the concept that certain combinations of depth, geological composition, and electromagnetic fields might create localized fluctuations in space-time, essentially, small regions where time's relationship with space temporarily differs from its behavior in normal environments. Such theoretical conditions would align with some aspects of Einstein's relativity theories, which establish that time is not an absolute constant, but rather a dimension that can be affected by gravity, velocity, and potentially other factors not yet fully understood. Under this hypothesis, vessels entering these regions might experience time at rates different from external observers, creating the documented discrepancies between onboard and shore-based chronologies. Whatever their true explanation, these temporal anomalies represent perhaps the most profound category of ocean mystery phenomena that challenge not just specific scientific fields, but our fundamental understanding of reality's consistent operation across all Earth environments. They suggest the possibility that even time itself, perhaps the most basic constant in human experience, might become variable under certain conditions in our ocean's least explored regions. And they raise the disturbing question of whether other aspects of reality we consider immutable might similarly prove fluid in environments sufficiently different from those where human observation and scientific method developed. Before we conclude tonight's exploration, let's consider one final category of ocean mystery, what maritime psychologists have termed the call of the deep, a documented psychological phenomenon affecting a small but significant percentage of people who spend extended time at sea. Unlike routine psychological effects of ocean travel, such as sensory deprivation or isolation response, this specific pattern manifests as a powerful, persistent attraction to deep water that can override survival instinct and rational thought. Those who experience it report feeling an almost irresistible compulsion to enter the water over deep ocean areas, often describing the sensation as being called or invited by some presence or intelligence they perceive as dwelling in the depths. The phenomenon was first formally studied following a series of incidents aboard oceanographic research vessels in the 1970s, where crew members with no previous psychological issues or suicidal ideation attempted to enter the water while sailing over deep ocean trenches. In several cases, individuals had to be physically restrained after attempting to climb over safety railings, with some showing remarkable strength and determination despite the obvious mortal danger. When later interviewed, these individuals typically reported experiencing a profound sense that something was communicating with them from the deep water below, extending what they perceived as an invitation they felt compelled to accept. Most described the experience as dreamlike, but overwhelmingly real, often using terms like hypnotic or mesmerizing to characterize the sensation. Subsequent research has documented hundreds of similar cases across commercial shipping, military vessels, and private sailing craft. The phenomenon appears to cluster around specific ocean regions, particularly waters over extreme depths exceeding 15,000 feet, certain seamounts with unusual geological compositions, and regions with documented magnetic or electromagnetic anomalies. It affects individuals regardless of swimming ability, previous ocean experience, or psychological profile, though it shows higher incidence rates among those with heightened sensitivity to electromagnetic fields or history of migraine headaches, a correlation that has led some researchers to propose connections to unusual electromagnetic phenomena in certain marine environments. What makes this phenomenon particularly significant as an ocean mystery is its consistency across cultures, time periods, and types of maritime activity. Historical ships' logs from the Age of Exploration contain numerous accounts of crew members becoming possessed by sea madness and trying to jump overboard while crossing specific ocean regions, often the same regions where modern vessels report similar incidents. Indigenous maritime cultures worldwide maintain taboos against certain deep-water areas, describing them as places where the water calls to you or where sea spirits try to take you below. These traditional prohibitions often correlate geographically with modern documented clusters of the phenomenon, suggesting continuous human experience of these effects across centuries of maritime activity. Conventional scientific explanations have focused on potential environmental factors that might affect human neurology or psychology. These include theories about infrasound, extremely low-frequency sound waves below human hearing generated by certain underwater geological features, which laboratory studies have shown can induce anxiety, disorientation, and even hallucinatory experiences in some individuals. Other researchers have proposed connections to electromagnetic anomalies affecting brain function, potentially disrupting normal activity in regions associated with reasoning, emotional regulation, and risk assessment. Some neurologists have suggested the phenomenon might represent a specific form of seizure activity triggered by combinations of sensory input, unique to certain marine environments, essentially a neurological response to conditions that only exist in specific ocean locations. Yet these conventional explanations struggle to account for the remarkably consistent subjective experience reported across diverse cases, specifically the perception of communication or invitation from an apparently intelligent source. While the scientific community generally attributes this to hallucination or confabulation, the mind-creating narrative to explain unusual neurological states, the specificity and consistency of the reported experience across individuals with no prior knowledge of the phenomenon raises questions about whether something more complex might be occurring in these environments. Some fringe researchers have proposed more controversial possibilities, including the concept that certain deep ocean environments might generate conditions where human consciousness becomes more receptive to forms of information or communication normally filtered out by ordinary brain function. Under this hypothesis, the call experienced by affected individuals might represent contact with aspects of reality typically inaccessible to human perception, perhaps intelligent marine organisms operating beyond our conventional detection capabilities, or even more exotic possibilities, such as non-physical consciousness manifestations that some traditions associate with deep-water environments. Whatever its true explanation, the call of the deep represents a documented, persistent psychological phenomenon that continues to affect maritime activities in specific ocean regions. Modern vessels operating in known high-incidence areas often implement specific protocols, including restricted deck access, paired watchstanding, and enhanced psychological monitoring for crew members, showing early indicators of the condition. Yet, despite these precautions, maritime records continue to document losses of individual crew members in circumstances suggesting they may have entered the water deliberately while experiencing this compelling but potentially fatal attraction to the deep. As we conclude tonight's exploration of the ocean's darkest mysteries, perhaps this final phenomenon encapsulates what makes these maritime enigmas so profoundly unsettling. Beyond specific unexplained creatures, structures, or events, the deepest ocean mystery may be the recurring suggestion that something in these vast waters can reach into the human mind itself, calling to us, affecting our perception of reality, occasionally even compelling us toward actions that defy our own survival instinct. The oceans cover over 70% of our planet, with average depths exceeding 2 miles and maximum depths approaching 7 miles. They represent the largest, most alien environment on Earth, a realm of perpetual darkness, crushing pressure, and conditions so different from our terrestrial experience that we can only briefly visit its edges with sophisticated technological support. Is it any wonder that these waters might harbor realities that operate according to principles we struggle to comprehend? Or that our brief ventures into this fundamentally alien realm might occasionally encounter phenomena that challenge not just our scientific understanding, but our basic conception of what constitutes reality? The history of science repeatedly shows that what appears mysterious or impossible often simply reflects the limitations of current knowledge rather than true impossibility. From continental drift to deep-sea hydrothermal vent communities, from giant squid to bioluminescent communication networks, the oceans have repeatedly housed realities that were dismissed as fantasy until direct observation forced scientific acceptance. How many more such realities might still await discovery in the 95% of our oceans that remain largely unexplored? What might exist in the lightless trenches, the vast abyssal plains, or the complex terrain of deep seamounts that human observation has barely begun to document? And what might these discoveries eventually reveal about the boundaries of what we consider possible, not just in terms of specific creatures or phenomena, but in our fundamental understanding of how consistently reality itself operates across all Earth environments? Let's now explore an aspect of ocean mysteries that bridges the gap between the physical and the psychological, the documented phenomenon of collective maritime hallucinations. Unlike individual perceptual anomalies that might be explained through personal psychology, these are cases where multiple observers simultaneously report experiencing the same impossible phenomena, often with remarkable consistency in the details they describe. These shared perceptual events challenge our understanding of both oceanic environments and human consciousness, raising uncomfortable questions about the reliability of perception even when confirmed across multiple witnesses. One of the most extensively documented cases occurred in 1983 aboard the research vessel Atlantis II during a geological survey of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. 17 crew members, including the captain, 3 marine biologists, and several experienced oceanographers, simultaneously reported observing what they described as a city of light visible deep beneath the vessel. The phenomenon appeared as an organized array of brilliant blue-white lights in geometric patterns spanning an estimated area of 3 square miles at a depth observers, judged to be approximately 600 feet below the surface. What made this sighting particularly remarkable was the level of specific detail consistently reported across witnesses. Individuals separated on different parts of the ship independently described the same precise arrangement of lights, the same patterns of movement, and even the same unusual color quality that one scientist compared to lightning seen through clear ice. The sighting lasted approximately 27 minutes before the lights dimmed and apparently descended beyond visual range. Throughout the event, the ship's instruments recorded multiple anomalies, compass deviations of up to 35 degrees, intermittent sonar returns suggesting solid structures where none should exist, and electrical fluctuations affecting communications equipment. Yet despite multiple witnesses and instrument recordings, no conventional scientific explanation adequately accounted for the shared experience. The official report ultimately classified the event as a collective perceptual anomaly, possibly triggered by electromagnetic effects on brain function, essentially a mass hallucination caused by environmental factors. But this explanation struggled to account for why individuals with no line of sight to each other, some below decks viewing through different portholes, would independently report identical details of an event that supposedly existed only in their minds. Similar incidents have been documented by military vessels, commercial ships, and research expeditions across different oceans and decades. These reports consistently cluster around specific geographic features, particularly deep trenches, underwater mountain ranges, and regions with unusual electromagnetic profiles. The experiences typically combine visual phenomena with other sensory effects, sounds, physical sensations, and even specific emotional states reported consistently across multiple observers. In each case, conventional science struggles to explain how numerous individuals could simultaneously hallucinate identical complex experiences without prior communication or suggestion. Some researchers have proposed theories involving natural phenomena that might affect human perception in maritime environments. These include the possibility that certain combinations of bioluminescent organisms might create light patterns misinterpreted by human observers, or that underwater geological features might generate electromagnetic fields capable of directly stimulating the visual cortex in similar ways across different individuals. Others suggest that infrasound, low-frequency sound waves generated by certain underwater features might affect brain function in ways that create shared perceptual effects while remaining below the threshold of conscious hearing. More controversial hypotheses propose that these experiences might represent genuine perception of phenomena that exist at the boundaries of conventional reality, perhaps manifestations that normally remain outside human perceptual range, but become briefly visible under specific environmental conditions. Some theoretical physicists have suggested possibilities involving quantum mechanics and perception, proposing that certain oceanic environments might create conditions where quantum effects typically confined to subatomic scales might briefly manifest in ways perceptible to human consciousness. While highly speculative, such theories align with certain aspects of quantum physics that suggest reality at its most fundamental level contains possibilities far stranger than our everyday experience indicates. Whatever their true explanation, these collective maritime perceptual anomalies represent one of the most philosophically challenging categories of ocean mystery. They force us to consider the possibility that even with multiple witnesses and instrument readings, human perception of oceanic environments might sometimes encounter phenomena that resist categorization within our existing frameworks of understanding. They suggest boundaries to human knowledge that lie not just in the external world, but in the interface between consciousness and reality, places where what we perceive, even collectively, might be neither straightforward hallucination nor conventional reality, but something occupying an uncomfortable territory between established categories. Let's now turn to another dimension of oceanic mystery, the persistent reports of underwater sounds that defy conventional scientific classification. Unlike the previously discussed acoustic phenomena, like the bloop or Julia, these are recurring sound patterns that suggest ordered complexity more typically associated with communication than with random natural processes. Their documentation by hydrophones operated by multiple nations' scientific and military organizations removes the element of subjective human perception, providing concrete evidence of acoustic phenomena that continue to resist satisfactory explanation through known mechanisms. Among the most persistently puzzling is what researchers have termed the slow pulse sequence, first detected by U.S. Navy hydrophone arrays in 1962 and continuously recorded at irregular intervals ever since. This phenomenon consists of precisely spaced, low-frequency pulses that repeat in complex but non-random patterns, suggesting what acoustic analysts have reluctantly described as apparent coding properties. The pulses maintain exact frequency characteristics and timing relationships despite being recorded thousands of miles apart and across decades of observation. Unlike biological sounds that show variation between individuals or evolution over time, the slow pulse sequence maintains perfect consistency in its fundamental properties, while its complex internal patterns change in ways that mathematical analysis suggests are not random. What makes this acoustic phenomenon particularly difficult to explain is its calculated information density. When analyzed using information theory principles, the patterns demonstrate the capacity to carry significant amounts of data, far more than the acoustic signatures of any known marine organism, and with structural characteristics that more closely resemble artificial communication systems than natural sound production. The sounds originate from ultra-deep water, typically from regions with depths exceeding 20,000 feet, making them inaccessible to all but the most advanced deep-diving equipment. Attempts to locate the specific sources using triangulation have consistently failed, with the signals appearing to emanate from areas that shift geographic position faster than any known marine creature could travel. Similar unexplained acoustic patterns have been recorded in the Indian Ocean, the South Atlantic, and specific regions of the Arctic Ocean. In each case, the sounds demonstrate properties that defy conventional classification as either biological, geological, or human technological in origin. They show apparent responsiveness to environmental conditions, changing their patterns during significant seismic events, major storms, or periods of intense solar activity, suggesting some form of adaptive response to external conditions, rather than random or mechanistic sound production. Conventional scientific explanations have proposed various hypotheses, including the possibility of unknown deep-sea creatures with sound-producing capabilities far more sophisticated than currently documented species. Others suggest the sounds might result from complex interactions between water pressure, geological features, and thermal layering in extreme depths, essentially natural acoustic phenomena that only emerge under the specific conditions found in the deepest ocean environments. Some researchers have even proposed connections to human activity, suggesting the sounds might represent previously undisclosed deepwater technologies operated by military or research organizations. Yet each of these conventional explanations encounters significant problems. The biological hypothesis fails to account for the sound's perfect consistency over decades, a characteristic not observed in any known organism, which typically show individual variation and evolutionary changes over time. The geological explanation cannot address the apparent responsiveness to external conditions or the mathematical properties, suggesting information encoding rather than random natural processes. And the human technological hypothesis struggles with both the global distribution of the phenomena and their continuous documentation, since the 1960s, timeframes and geographic ranges that exceed known human capabilities for maintaining underwater installations. This has led some acoustic researchers to reluctantly consider more exotic possibilities, including the concept that these sound patterns might represent communication systems from unknown intelligent marine species, or even artificial systems of non-human origin, operating in the most inaccessible regions of our oceans. While such hypotheses remain far outside mainstream scientific consideration, the simple fact remains that decades of recorded evidence documents sound patterns, with properties suggesting ordered complexity, information encoding, and environmental responsiveness, characteristics typically associated with intelligence rather than random natural processes. The implications of these persistent acoustic mysteries extend beyond specific questions about their source. They challenge our assumption that human technology represents the most sophisticated systems operating in our oceans. They suggest the possibility that our waters might host communication networks of unknown origin or purpose, operating continuously for decades in the least accessible regions of our planet. And perhaps most profoundly, they raise the question of whether we would even recognize non-human communication if we encountered it, whether our anthropocentric assumptions about what constitutes intelligence or communication might blind us to sophisticated systems operating according to principles we haven't yet learned to recognize. The ocean's acoustic environment may thus represent one of the most concrete, consistently documented frontiers, where human knowledge encounters phenomena that resist incorporation into our existing frameworks of understanding. Unlike subjective experiences or fleeting visual anomalies, these sound patterns exist as decades of recorded data, available for ongoing analysis as our analytical capabilities advance. They stand as persistent reminders that even with sophisticated recording technology and decades of observation, our oceans continue to produce phenomena that resist satisfactory scientific explanation. Let's explore yet another dimension of oceanic mystery, what marine archaeologists sometimes call impossible artifacts, objects recovered from deep-sea environments that should not exist according to our understanding of human history and technological development. Unlike the controversial underwater structures discussed earlier, which remain in situ and thus subject to interpretation, these are physical objects that have been recovered, documented, and in some cases subjected to scientific analysis, yet their existence continues to challenge conventional historical narratives. Among the most puzzling are the Antikythera-class artifacts, precision-engineered metal objects, occasionally recovered from ancient shipwrecks that demonstrate technical capabilities, supposedly unavailable to the civilizations of their time. The original Antikythera mechanism, discovered in 1901 from a shipwreck dated to approximately 60 BCE, has been extensively studied and recognized as an astronomical calculator of remarkable sophistication. Less well known are similar artifacts recovered from deep-water wrecks that demonstrate even more advanced engineering, but have received comparatively little scientific attention or public acknowledgement. In 1988, a Greek sponge diver working in waters near Crete recovered a small bronze device with internal gearing from a previously undocumented shipwreck at approximately 300 feet depth. Initial analysis suggested the wreck dated to approximately the 1st century BCE, contemporary with the Antikythera wreck. However, the recovered mechanism contained engineering elements that would not be invented until the 18th century, including a form of differential gearing and what appeared to be miniaturized internal components machined to tolerances, impossible to achieve with ancient technology. Most puzzling were elemental composition tests, showing metal alloys containing elements in combinations that metallurgists confirmed could not have been created using ancient smelting techniques. After initial examination, the artifact was reportedly transferred to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens for further study. However, no official publications regarding the object have ever appeared in archaeological literature, and inquiries about its status have been met with claims that no such artifact was ever received. The sponge diver who made the discovery maintained until his death that he had found and surrendered the object as described, raising uncomfortable questions about why a potentially revolutionary archaeological find would be effectively removed from the scientific record. Similar cases have emerged from deep-water wrecks in the South China Sea, the waters near Sicily, and portions of the Caribbean associated with Spanish colonial shipping routes. In each case, artifacts have been recovered that demonstrate engineering capabilities, material compositions, or design principles that appear anachronistic for their historical context. And in each case, initial scientific interest has been followed by the objects either disappearing into private collections, being reclassified as modern intrusions into ancient sites, or simply vanishing from institutional records entirely. This pattern has led some researchers to suggest the possibility of institutional resistance to archaeological finds that would require substantial revision of established historical narratives. Conventional archaeology generally presents human technological development as a relatively linear progression, with innovations building incrementally upon previous knowledge. Artifacts demonstrating precision engineering, advanced metallurgy, or design concepts supposedly unavailable to ancient civilizations create fundamental challenges to this narrative, suggesting either that historical capabilities were far more advanced than currently acknowledged, or that some ancient cultures had access to knowledge whose source cannot be explained through conventional historical models. More controversial interpretations have proposed various alternative explanations for these anachronistic artifacts. Some researchers suggest the possibility of advanced ancient civilizations predating currently recognized historical cultures, perhaps sophisticated societies that collapsed due to climate change or other catastrophes, leaving only fragmented evidence of their technological achievements. Others propose the more exotic possibility that certain ancient cultures might have had contact with non-human intelligence, either terrestrial or extraterrestrial, accounting for technological knowledge that appears beyond the capabilities of their historical context. While such interpretations remain far outside mainstream archaeological thinking, the physical reality of recovered artifacts with properties that defy conventional historical explanation creates a persistent challenge to established narratives. These objects, raised from deep-water environments that typically preserve materials better than terrestrial sites, represent another category of ocean mystery, where direct physical evidence conflicts with the boundaries of current scientific consensus. They suggest the possibility that human history, particularly regarding technological development, may be far more complex and non-linear than our current models acknowledge. The ocean depths may thus preserve not only biological and geological mysteries, but also archaeological evidence that challenges our understanding of our own species' technological history. In the relatively stable, oxygen-poor environments of deep-water sites, materials that would quickly degrade on land can remain intact for thousands of years, potentially preserving evidence of historical realities that contradict established narratives. The question remains, how many more such impossible artifacts might lie undiscovered in shipwrecks and underwater sites worldwide, and whether future discoveries might eventually force fundamental revisions to our understanding of human technological development. Let's now venture into one of the most persistent yet least scientifically acknowledged ocean mysteries, what maritime traditions worldwide have called sudden seas, unexpected, and catastrophic wave phenomena that defy conventional hydrodynamic explanation. While rogue waves, extremely large, unpredictable waves, have gained scientific recognition in recent decades, another class of maritime anomaly remains largely unacknowledged by mainstream oceanography, despite thousands of documented incidents, cases where ocean surface conditions change instantaneously and dramatically without apparent environmental cause. These events typically share several distinctive characteristics that separate them from conventional hazardous sea conditions. They occur with no meteorological warning, often under clear skies and moderate weather conditions. They manifest as circular or ovoid areas of intense disturbance surrounded by normal sea conditions, with witnesses describing sharp, distinct boundaries, like a line drawn on the water. Most distinctively, they emerge instantaneously rather than building gradually. Mariners consistently report conditions changing from calm to life-threatening in seconds, without the progressive development seen in normal wave patterns. One thoroughly documented case occurred in 1978, when the cargo vessel MS Stockholm encountered what the captain's official report described as a sudden sea anomaly while crossing the North Atlantic under clear conditions with moderate 5-foot swells. Without warning or environmental indicators, a circular area of water approximately 300 yards in diameter, directly ahead of the ship, erupted into 30-foot breaking waves with visible rotational movement. The surrounding ocean remained unchanged, with the normal 5-foot swells continuing right to the distinct boundary of the disturbance. Multiple crew members reported that the affected area appeared to be boiling with a frothy white appearance, while simultaneously developing massive breaking waves that seemed to move in a counterclockwise rotational pattern, rather than the directional movement of normal wave action. The ship had insufficient time to alter course and entered the anomaly, suffering significant damage, including a partially collapsed forward cargo hatch, numerous broken windows, and a cracked foremast, damage consistent with encounters with 30-plus foot seas rather than the moderate conditions that prevailed throughout the surrounding area. Perhaps most puzzling, the entire event lasted less than 3 minutes, with the water returning to normal 5-foot swells as suddenly as the disturbance had appeared. No seismic activity, underwater explosions, or weather phenomena were recorded in the region that could explain such a localized, intense, and temporary disruption. Similar sudden sea events have been documented by commercial shipping, military vessels, and oceanographic expeditions across all major oceans. They appear with higher frequency in certain regions, particularly the western North Atlantic, portions of the South Pacific near the Louisville Seamount chain, and the northwestern Indian Ocean. In each case, the commonality of sudden onset, circular pattern, distinct boundaries, and rapid cessation distinguishes these events from conventional ocean hazards. When plotted globally, incident reports show correlations with underwater features, including seamounts, ridge systems, and areas with unusual geomagnetic properties. Conventional scientific explanations have proposed various mechanisms, including localized underwater landslides, releasing energy to the surface, gas hydrate eruptions from seafloor deposits, or complex interactions between ocean currents and underwater topography, creating standing wave patterns. Yet these explanations struggle to account for the reported characteristics of actual incidents, particularly the instantaneous onset, perfectly circular boundaries, and equally sudden cessation of these events. Natural wave-generating phenomena typically show more gradual development and dissipation patterns, with energy propagating beyond the immediate area of disturbance. More speculative theories have proposed connections to electromagnetic or gravitational anomalies in certain ocean regions, suggesting that temporary fluctuations in fundamental forces might briefly affect water's behavior in localized areas. Some researchers have noted correlations between reported sudden sea events and unusual electromagnetic readings, recorded by satellites passing over the same regions, suggesting possible connections to little understood interactions between Earth's magnetic field and specific underwater geological features. Perhaps most intriguing are patterns revealing temporal as well as spatial clustering. These events appear to occur with greater frequency during certain astronomical alignments, particularly during specific lunar phases and during periods of heightened solar activity. This temporal correlation suggests possible connections to gravitational or electromagnetic factors, rather than purely geological or oceanographic mechanisms. Similar temporal patterns appear in traditional maritime knowledge across culturally unconnected seafaring societies, with prohibitions against traveling through certain areas during specific lunar phases, traditions that apparently predate scientific documentation of these phenomena by centuries. Sudden seas thus represent another category of ocean mystery, where extensive documentation of actual incidents conflicts with conventional scientific explanation. They suggest the possibility that even basic physical processes like wave formation, among the most studied phenomena in oceanography, might occasionally operate according to mechanisms not fully incorporated into current scientific understanding. And they raise the disturbing possibility that certain ocean regions might periodically manifest localized conditions, where water itself behaves according to principles that defy current hydrodynamic models, creating navigational hazards that cannot be predicted or explained through conventional environmental monitoring. As we continue our journey through the ocean's most profound mysteries, let's now explore what marine biologists sometimes call ecosystem impossibilities, documented biological phenomena in ocean environments that contradict established understanding of how life should function under specific conditions. Unlike cryptozoological questions about undiscovered individual species, these are cases where entire biological communities have been observed operating according to principles that challenge fundamental assumptions about energy requirements, environmental tolerances, and evolutionary development. One of the most thoroughly documented ecosystem impossibilities was discovered in 2013 during a deepwater research expedition in the Sargasso Sea. At depths between 3,000 and 4,000 feet, in a region with no hydrothermal vents or methane seeps that typically support deep-sea life, researchers encountered a thriving biological community that violated basic principles of deep ocean ecology. The ecosystem contained species diversity approximately 300 times greater than should be possible given the available energy inputs in that environment, with complex food webs including multiple large predator species that should require far more energy than could be supplied through known mechanisms at that depth. Most puzzling was the discovery of a previously unknown phosphorescent algae-like organism growing in complete darkness at depths where photosynthesis should be impossible. Analysis showed these organisms were indeed conducting a form of photosynthesis despite the absence of sunlight, apparently utilizing an unknown biochemical pathway that could extract usable energy from the faint bioluminescence of surrounding creatures, a process requiring photosynthetic efficiency far beyond any known biological system. The organisms demonstrated other impossible characteristics, including cellular structures that maintained integrity under pressures that should have crushed them and metabolic processes operating at temperatures where enzyme function should chemically halt. Initial publications about these findings in specialized oceanographic journals were met with skepticism from the broader scientific community, with critics suggesting sampling contamination or methodological errors. However, subsequent expeditions confirmed the initial observations, documenting an ecosystem that continued to operate according to biological principles that contradicted established understanding. The region has since been designated a biological anomaly zone in oceanographic databases, acknowledged to exist but remaining largely unexplained within conventional scientific frameworks. Similar ecosystem impossibilities have been documented in portions of the Southern Ocean near Antarctica, deep trenches in the Western Pacific, and in certain regions of the Arctic Ocean beneath permanent ice cover. In each case, researchers have encountered biological communities demonstrating energy utilization, species diversity, or metabolic functioning that exceed what should be theoretically possible given the available resources and environmental conditions. These ecosystems typically share certain characteristics. They occur in extreme or isolated environments, demonstrate unexplained energy efficiency, far exceeding known biological systems, and often include organisms with hybrid characteristics that blur conventional taxonomic boundaries. The scientific community has proposed various explanations, including the possibility of undiscovered energy sources in these environments, novel metabolic pathways not yet understood by biochemists, or evolutionary adaptations, so specialized that they appear to violate general biological principles while actually representing extreme optimization for specific conditions. Some researchers suggest these ecosystems might represent biological communities that have evolved in isolation for millions of years longer than previously thought possible, developing solutions to energy and survival challenges that appear impossible, only because they've evolved along different trajectories than more accessible shallow water ecosystems. More controversial interpretations propose that these biological anomalies might represent evidence of fundamental gaps in our understanding of how life itself operates, suggesting the possibility that biological processes might sometimes access energy sources or organizational principles not yet recognized by conventional science. Some theoretical biologists have cautiously suggested connections to emerging concepts in quantum biology, proposing that certain extreme environments might enable biological utilization of quantum effects that remain theoretical in conventional settings. Others have noted disturbing similarities between these anomalous ecosystems and speculative models of how extraterrestrial life might function under conditions dramatically different from Earth's surface environments. These ecosystem impossibilities challenge not just specific biological theories, but our broader understanding of life's fundamental constraints and capabilities. They suggest the possibility that even basic biological principles established through centuries of scientific observation might have exceptions or alternative pathways in environments sufficiently different from those where our biological sciences developed. And they raise profound questions about how completely we understand even the most basic life processes on our own planet. If entire thriving ecosystems can operate according to principles that appear to violate established biological understanding, what other aspects of life might function through mechanisms beyond our current scientific frameworks? Let's now venture into one of the ocean's most recently documented mysteries: what researchers have termed deep water intelligence signatures, patterns of behavior observed in certain marine environments that suggest forms of intelligence or organized activity not attributable to any known species or technological source. Unlike traditional questions about individual intelligent marine species, like dolphins or octopi, these observations involve complex, coordinated behaviors across multiple organisms or systems that demonstrate characteristics typically associated with collective intelligence or technological intervention. The most extensively documented case emerged from a 2017 deepwater research project using autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, to study seamounts in the South Pacific. The unmanned submersibles, programmed to conduct systematic surveys along predetermined paths, repeatedly experienced what the research team initially classified as navigation anomalies, deviations from their programmed courses that could not be explained by currents, equipment malfunction, or known environmental factors. Analysis of the AUV's data logs revealed disturbing patterns. The navigation deviations weren't random, but appeared deliberately designed to direct the vehicles away from specific areas of the seamounts, essentially creating exclusion zones that the AUVs were prevented from mapping. When researchers deployed additional AUVs specifically to investigate these exclusion zones, they encountered what the project's technical report described as apparent coordinated interference, multiple independent factors simultaneously affecting the vehicles in patterns that mathematicians confirmed were statistically impossible to occur through random natural processes. These included precisely timed electrical system fluctuations, sudden current patterns that existed nowhere else in the region, and most disturbingly, what appeared to be coordinated behavior from multiple marine organisms that positioned themselves in formations, creating sonar interference around specific areas. Video footage from the AUVs showed numerous unidentified fish and invertebrate species, moving in synchronized patterns that marine biologists confirmed were not typical schooling or predator response behaviors. Instead, the organisms maintained precise geometric arrangements that created what acoustic specialists described as sonar cancellation patterns, formations that effectively rendered certain areas invisible to the AUV's primary sensing systems. More puzzling was the apparent coordination between entirely different species with no known communication mechanisms, including fish, cephalopods, and invertebrates simultaneously adopting complementary positions in these formations. Conventional scientific explanations have struggled to account for these observations. Some researchers have proposed the possibility of unknown chemical signaling mechanisms that might allow cross-species communication in deep water environments, or previously undocumented symbiotic relationships that might create the appearance of coordination through separate responses to common stimuli. Others suggest the potential for electromagnetic sensing capabilities in species not previously known to possess such features, potentially allowing response to artificial electromagnetic signatures generated by research equipment. Yet these conventional explanations fail to address the apparent purposefulness of the observed behaviors, specifically the fact that the interference consistently prevented mapping of particular areas while leaving others accessible, and adapted in real time to researchers' attempts to overcome the initial interference. This adaptive response suggests a level of intelligence and intentionality typically associated with either advanced cognitive capabilities or technological intervention, neither of which should exist at the depths and locations involved. Similar patterns of apparent intelligent interference have been documented during deep water research projects in the Indian Ocean, portions of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and specific regions of the Arctic Ocean. In each case, researchers encountered what appeared to be coordinated, multi-factor obstruction of specific research objectives, particularly those involving detailed mapping or sampling of certain underwater features. And in each case, the interference combined biological elements, organized behavior of multiple marine species, with environmental factors, localized current or temperature changes in patterns, suggesting coordinated purpose rather than random natural processes. These observations have led some researchers to reluctantly consider more exotic possibilities, including the concept that certain deep ocean environments might host undocumented intelligence in forms we haven't yet learned to recognize properly. This might manifest as distributed intelligence across multiple organisms rather than centralized in individual creatures, emergent properties of ecosystem-wide communication networks, or even non-biological systems with properties that mimic intelligence when interacting with human technology. Some have even proposed the possibility of undiscovered technological activity in deep ocean environments, essentially artificial systems of unknown origin operating in the least accessible regions of our planet. While such interpretations remain far outside mainstream scientific consensus, the documented observations of apparent intelligent interference in deep water research continue to accumulate in technical databases and expedition reports. They represent another category of ocean mystery, where direct observation by qualified scientific personnel using sophisticated equipment has produced evidence that resists explanation through conventional understanding. And they raise profound questions about whether our current concepts of intelligence, largely shaped by terrestrial, air-breathing, visually oriented evolutionary development, might blind us to recognizing other forms of intelligence that evolved under radically different environmental conditions. As we approach the conclusion of our extended journey through the ocean's most persistent mysteries, let's consider what these diverse enigmas collectively suggest about the boundaries of human knowledge and the nature of the reality we inhabit. Beyond specific unexplained phenomena, creatures, or events, the ocean's greatest mystery may be what it reveals about the limitations of our understanding, not just regarding specific marine environments, but concerning the fundamental nature of the world itself. Throughout scientific history, the ocean has repeatedly forced revision of established theories and assumptions. From the discovery of hydrothermal vent communities that rewrote our understanding of where and how life can exist, to the confirmation of giant and colossal squid that transformed sea monster legends into acknowledged biological reality, marine environments have consistently harbored phenomena that initially appeared impossible according to established knowledge. This historical pattern suggests humility when confronting current ocean mysteries that similarly challenge contemporary scientific frameworks. Perhaps the most profound implication of these persistent enigmas is the possibility that reality itself might be more variable, more conditional than our everyday experience suggests. The ocean environment differs so fundamentally from terrestrial conditions that it might occasionally manifest phenomena operating according to principles that function differently in water than in air, under extreme pressure than at surface conditions, in perpetual darkness than in light-based environments. If physical laws and biological processes that we consider universal actually have exceptions or alternative expressions under conditions sufficiently different from those where human observation and science developed, our understanding of reality's fundamental nature may be more environment-specific than we currently acknowledge. This possibility aligns with emerging concepts in theoretical physics, suggesting that even seemingly absolute constants might have varied under different conditions throughout universal history, or might express differently in extreme environments. It echoes developing theories in biology proposing that life might organize itself according to different fundamental principles in environments radically unlike those where our biological sciences originated. And it resonates with the philosophical recognition that human perception and cognition evolved specifically for terrestrial survival, potentially leaving us ill-equipped to fully comprehend phenomena that evolved or exist under profoundly different conditions. The ocean's mysteries thus challenge not just specific scientific disciplines, but a broader assumption that reality operates consistently across all earthly environments. Let's now explore a phenomenon that has perplexed marine scientists for decades. What oceanographers call water memory anomalies, documented cases where specific regions of ocean appear to retain traces of past events, long after physical evidence should have dissipated. Unlike the well-understood processes of currents, temperature gradients, or chemical dispersion that normally govern water behavior, these anomalies suggest capabilities for information retention within water itself that defy conventional hydrodynamic and thermodynamic principles. These phenomena manifest not as subjective perceptions, but as measurable physical realities documented through sophisticated instrumentation, raising profound questions about water's fundamental properties in certain oceanic contexts. The first comprehensive scientific documentation of these anomalies occurred in 1996, when researchers studying the aftermath of a volcanic eruption near Tonga discovered that water in a specific region continued to demonstrate chemical and thermal signatures of the eruption over 2 years, after all known physical mechanisms should have dispersed these effects. Despite normal currents, temperature gradients, and mixing patterns that should have eliminated any trace within weeks. Instruments consistently detected a precisely defined cylindrical column of water, approximately 600 feet in diameter, extending from surface to seafloor, that maintained chemical compositions and temperature variations, matching conditions immediately after the eruption. More puzzling, this anomalous water column remained fixed in geographic position, despite powerful currents continuously flowing through it, as if the location itself, rather than the specific water molecules, retained the information. Similar water memory anomalies have since been documented in regions of the Mediterranean Sea following major shipping disasters, portions of the North Sea after underwater munitions disposal operations, and around certain underwater archaeological sites in the Caribbean. In each case, water in precisely defined areas continues to demonstrate physical and chemical properties related to specific past events long after normal oceanic processes should have eliminated all traces. These retained memories manifest in measurable parameters including specific conductivity values, isotope ratios, molecular hydrogen bond angles, and electromagnetic signatures that precisely match conditions during the original events. What makes these anomalies particularly significant is their violation of fundamental principles governing fluid dynamics and molecular behavior in aqueous solutions. Conventional physics holds that water molecules constantly exchange positions, with individual molecules rarely maintaining specific relationships with neighbors for more than nanoseconds. This molecular chaos should make information retention of the kind observed in these anomalies physically impossible beyond extremely short timeframes. Yet in these documented cases, water appears capable of maintaining specific molecular arrangements and energy states for months or years within precisely defined spatial boundaries, defying expected entropy increases and energy dissipation. The scientific community has proposed various theoretical mechanisms that might explain these observations, including speculations about previously unrecognized quantum effects operating at macroscopic scales in certain marine environments. Some researchers have suggested these anomalies might represent evidence of extended quantum coherence, the ability of particles to maintain coordinated quantum states across distances and time frames, far beyond those currently acknowledged in mainstream physics. Others propose connections to emerging theories in quantum biology, suggesting that water surrounding biological molecules might maintain information-carrying coherence domains under specific conditions, principles that might operate at larger scales in certain oceanic environments. More controversial hypotheses suggest these water memory anomalies might be connected to what some physical chemists have termed long-range molecular ordering, the theoretical ability of water molecules to form extended, information-preserving structures under certain electromagnetic or geological conditions. While laboratory experiments have demonstrated such ordering only at microscopic scales and for brief durations, these oceanic anomalies suggest the possibility that unknown environmental factors might enable such phenomena to manifest at vastly larger scales and timeframes in specific marine contexts. Whatever their explanation, these documented water memory anomalies represent another category of ocean mystery that challenges fundamental scientific principles. They suggest possibilities regarding water's physical properties that extend beyond current theoretical frameworks, with potential implications reaching from basic physics to information theory. And they raise the profound question of whether Earth's oceans, comprising the vast majority of the biosphere, might possess capabilities for environmental interaction and information processing that our terrestrial evolved science has fundamentally underestimated. Let's shift our focus now to a different category of marine enigma, what researchers have termed ghost currents, ocean movements that appear and disappear with remarkable regularity, yet cannot be explained by any known hydrodynamic mechanisms. Unlike normal ocean currents driven by temperature differentials, wind patterns, or tidal forces, these movements occur with mathematical precision at specific locations and times, often directly opposing prevailing water movements, without apparent energy sources to power such counterflows. Their documentation through both instrumental measurement and centuries of maritime observation creates another oceanic puzzle that resists conventional scientific explanation. Among the most thoroughly studied ghost currents is the phenomenon known as the Hatteras Spiral, occurring approximately 40 miles east of Cape Hatteras in the western Atlantic. Every 57 days, with precision measurable down to hours, a perfect spiral current formation approximately 2 miles in diameter appears in this location, rotating clockwise with steadily increasing velocity toward its center. The formation persists for exactly 27 hours before dissipating completely, regardless of surrounding ocean conditions. Most puzzling is the current's energy profile. It generates water movement directly against the powerful Gulf Stream without any detectable energy input, creating a spiral pattern that maintains perfect geometric proportions, regardless of the surrounding water's temperature, salinity, or movement. Similar ghost currents have been documented in portions of the South Pacific, specific regions of the Arctic Ocean, and in deep water near certain mid-ocean ridges. In each case, the currents demonstrate three key characteristics that separate them from conventional ocean movements: perfect mathematical regularity in both timing and geometric structure, independence from surrounding ocean conditions, including temperature, existing currents, and weather patterns, and apparent violation of energy conservation principles, generating water movement without detectable energy sources. What makes these ghost currents particularly significant as ocean mysteries is their documentation through multiple independent methods, spanning from ancient maritime knowledge to modern oceanographic instrumentation. Indigenous Pacific navigators possessed precise knowledge of these phenomena centuries before scientific discovery, with traditional sailing charts showing specific locations and times where water would move against itself with predictable patterns. Modern research vessels using acoustic Doppler current profilers have confirmed these traditional accounts with precise measurements, documenting current structures that maintain perfect mathematical relationships despite surrounding chaotic water movements. Conventional scientific explanations have proposed various mechanisms, including interactions between deep underwater topography and tidal forces, complex resonance effects between different frequency ocean movements, or previously undetected interactions between Earth's magnetic field and electrically conductive seawater. Yet each of these explanations fails to account for the precise mathematical regularity of these currents' timing and structure, their independence from surrounding conditions, and most problematically, their apparent ability to generate organized water movement without corresponding energy inputs. More speculative theoretical frameworks suggest possible connections to emerging concepts in plasma physics, particularly the self-organizing principles observed in certain electromagnetic plasma formations. Some researchers have proposed that complex interactions between Earth's geomagnetic field, deep ocean mineral deposits with unusual electrical properties, and conductive seawater might occasionally generate conditions analogous to those creating self-organizing plasma structures, essentially informational patterns that can organize matter without conventional energy transfer. While such theories remain far outside mainstream oceanographic thinking, the precisely documented characteristics of these ghost currents continue to resist explanation through conventional hydrodynamic mechanisms. Whatever their true cause, these ghost currents represent another category of ocean mystery, where direct measurement confirms phenomena that contradict established physical principles. They suggest the possibility that ocean waters might occasionally organize themselves according to mathematical principles not currently incorporated into our understanding of fluid dynamics. And they raise intriguing questions about potential connections between hydrodynamic phenomena and electromagnetic or informational processes that might operate in certain marine environments under specific conditions. Let's now explore one of the most unsettling biological mysteries of the deep, what marine ecologists have termed communal intelligence anomalies, documented cases where multiple unrelated marine species demonstrate coordinated behaviors far beyond their individual cognitive capabilities, acting temporarily as unified systems that exhibit characteristics typically associated with centralized intelligence. Unlike known examples of symbiosis or convergent behaviors driven by common environmental stimuli, these cases involve diverse species with no known communication mechanisms acting in precisely coordinated ways to achieve complex objectives that appear impossible without centralized planning and communication. The most extensively documented case emerged from a long-term observation project at Davidson Seamount, an underwater mountain in the eastern Pacific. In 2015, researchers using remote observation platforms recorded what they initially classified as coordinated multi-species behavior, instances where up to 17 different marine species, ranging from crustaceans to cephalopods to vertebrate fish, with no known social relationships, simultaneously altered their normal behaviors to create complex, coordinated patterns. These included formations where different species position themselves at mathematically precise intervals along perfect circles, spirals, or grid patterns. Sequential behaviors where various species perform specific actions in exact order with precise timing. And most disturbing, apparent problem-solving activities where multiple unrelated species cooperated to achieve objectives, impossible for any individual species. In one particularly compelling observation sequence, researchers documented 15 different species, including octopuses, crabs, eels, and various fish, working together to move a large boulder, revealing a geological feature underneath. The coordination involved precisely timed and positioned pushing efforts from multiple species, with some creating supporting structures while others applied force at exact angles needed for efficient movement. Marine biologists confirmed that this activity served no obvious feeding, reproductive, or defensive purpose for any of the participant species, nor could it be explained through individual species' instinctual behaviors or known interspecies relationships. Similar communal intelligence anomalies have been observed in deep-water environments near certain hydrothermal vent systems, within specific coral reef complexes in the western Pacific, and in abyssal regions of the southern Indian Ocean. In each case, the events share several key characteristics that distinguish them from normal marine biological activities: involvement of multiple species with no known communication mechanisms or evolutionary relationships, demonstration of mathematical precision in spatial arrangements and timing, apparent goal-directed behaviors serving no obvious biological purpose for the participant species, and temporary nature with normal species-specific behaviors resuming afterward as if the coordinated activity had never occurred. Conventional biological explanations have proposed various mechanisms, including the possibility of unknown chemical signaling compounds in the water that might temporarily synchronize behaviors across species, common responses to undetected environmental stimuli, such as subtle electromagnetic or acoustic signals, or complex ecological relationships not yet understood by marine biologists. Yet these explanations struggle to account for the mathematical precision observed in these behaviors, the apparent goal direction toward objectives with no clear biological purpose, and most problematically, the demonstration of collective problem-solving capabilities far exceeding the cognitive limits of any participant species. More controversial interpretations have cautiously suggested the possibility that these phenomena might represent evidence of emergent intelligence, temporary manifestations of cognition that exist not within individual organisms, but as properties of the system itself. Some theoretical biologists have proposed that under certain conditions, ecological networks might generate information processing capabilities, analogably to how neural networks create cognition, with individual organisms functioning similarly to neurons in a temporary ecological brain. While such concepts remain far outside mainstream biological thinking, the precisely documented behaviors in these communal intelligence anomalies continue to resist explanation through conventional understanding of marine species' cognitive and social capabilities. Whatever their true explanation, these communal intelligence events represent another category of ocean mystery where direct observation documents phenomena that challenge fundamental biological principles. They suggest possibilities regarding cognition and intelligence that extend beyond current organism-centered frameworks, with potential implications for our understanding of how information processing and decision-making can manifest in biological systems. And they raise profound questions about whether intelligence itself might sometimes emerge as a property of ecological relationships, rather than being confined to individual organisms with centralized nervous systems, a perspective that would fundamentally alter our conception of cognition's possible manifestations in deep ocean environments. Let's now venture into what might be called meta-mysteries of the deep, what some researchers have termed anomaly clusters, specific ocean regions, where multiple categories of unexplained phenomena consistently manifest in apparent relationship to each other. Unlike isolated ocean mysteries that might be studied within specific scientific disciplines, these anomaly clusters suggest connections between seemingly unrelated categories of enigmas, raising the possibility of common underlying mechanisms that might link diverse phenomena from biological impossibilities to physical anomalies. Their persistent documentation through both historical maritime records and modern scientific observation suggests patterns that transcend coincidence, potentially pointing toward fundamental gaps in our understanding of how reality functions in certain marine environments. The most thoroughly studied anomaly cluster exists in a region approximately 200 nautical miles southeast of the Azores, in the mid-Atlantic. This area, roughly circular and spanning approximately 30 square miles, has accumulated documentation of at least 7 distinct categories of unexplained phenomena, consistently manifesting within its boundaries over centuries of observation. These include all previously discussed mystery categories, from temporal anomalies and unexplained bioluminescence to apparent gravitational fluctuations and communal intelligence events, occurring with significantly higher frequency than surrounding waters. What makes this clustering particularly significant is the apparent temporal relationship between different phenomena types, with statistical analysis showing non-random sequences where certain anomaly categories consistently precede or follow others in patterns, suggesting causal relationships. Similar anomaly clusters have been identified in portions of the western Pacific near the Mariana Trench, specific regions of the Southern Ocean near the Antarctic Convergence, and in deep waters west of the Galapagos Islands. In each case, these regions demonstrate statistical hotspots for multiple mystery categories that significantly exceed mathematical probabilities for random distribution. More intriguingly, these clustered anomalies often demonstrate temporal patterns, suggesting relationships between phenomena types that conventional science would consider entirely unrelated, such as documented correlations between temporary gravitational fluctuations and subsequent appearance of water memory anomalies, or between electromagnetic abnormalities and later manifestation of communal intelligence events. What makes these anomaly clusters particularly significant as meta-mysteries is their suggestion of underlying principles that might connect seemingly disparate phenomena. If gravitational fluctuations consistently precede certain biological anomalies, or if electromagnetic irregularities reliably predict subsequent temporal distortions, these patterns suggest possible causal mechanisms operating across categorical boundaries that current scientific frameworks treat as entirely separate domains. Such cross-category relationships raise the profound possibility that our current compartmentalized approach to understanding natural phenomena, dividing reality into separate fields like physics, biology, and chemistry, might fundamentally limit our ability to comprehend certain aspects of reality that operate according to principles, transcending these artificial divisions. Some theoretical physicists and systems theorists have proposed that these anomaly clusters might represent evidence of what they term integrated phenomenological systems, environmental conditions, where various aspects of reality, typically treated as separate, actually function as unified wholes, with properties emerging from their relationships. Under such frameworks, the gravitational, electromagnetic, biological, and temporal anomalies consistently co-occurring in these regions would not represent separate mysteries requiring different explanations, but various manifestations of common underlying principles, operating at the intersection of multiple domains. More speculative interpretations suggest possible connections to emerging concepts in complexity theory and nonlinear dynamics, particularly the idea that certain environmental conditions might generate self-organizing systems operating across traditional category boundaries. Such systems might manifest properties that appear as distinct anomalies when viewed through specialized disciplinary frameworks, but actually represent different aspects of unified phenomena that require integrated perspectives to properly comprehend. Whatever their true explanation, these anomaly clusters represent perhaps the most profound category of ocean mystery phenomena that not only challenge specific scientific principles, but suggest fundamental limitations in how we conceptually organize and understand reality itself. They raise the possibility that certain aspects of how the world functions, particularly in extreme or unusual environments like deep ocean regions, might operate according to principles that transcend our current categorical frameworks. And they suggest the need for more integrated, cross-disciplinary approaches to studying ocean mysteries, approaches that can accommodate phenomena operating simultaneously across physical, biological, chemical, and even temporal domains in ways that challenge our compartmentalized conception of natural laws. Let's now explore what might be one of the most philosophically challenging ocean enigmas, what some researchers have termed perceptual boundary phenomena, documented cases where human perception and instrumentation simultaneously encounter apparent limitations when attempting to observe or measure certain deep ocean environments. Unlike conventional observational challenges that affect either human senses or specific instrument types, these boundaries appear to affect all observation methods simultaneously, suggesting not just technological limitations, but potential boundaries in the observability of certain marine phenomena, regardless of methodology. These cases raise profound questions about whether some aspects of oceanic reality might exist beyond the fundamental limits of both human perception and technological extension. The most thoroughly documented case involves what researchers have called the Challenger Deep Anomaly, a persistent observational limitation encountered by multiple expeditions to the deepest part of the Mariana Trench. Since the first crewed descent by the Bathske of Trieste in 1960, every observation attempt of a specific region within the deep has encountered the same perplexing limitation, approximately 400 feet above a particular section of the trench floor. Both human visual perception and all imaging technologies simultaneously experience what technical reports describe as coherent observational failure. Visual observation, cameras, sonar, LiDAR, and even passive radiation sensors all cease providing usable data at precisely the same boundary, despite each technology operating on different physical principles. Most puzzling is that this observational boundary remains fixed in geographic space rather than being attached to specific depth or environmental conditions, maintaining the exact position relative to geographic coordinates regardless of currents, temperature variations, or other changing factors. Similar perceptual boundary phenomena have been documented in specific regions of the Tonga Trench in the South Pacific, portions of the Puerto Rico Trench in the Atlantic, and near certain deep hydrothermal vent systems along the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. In each case, the phenomena share key characteristics that distinguish them from conventional observational limitations. They affect all observation methods simultaneously, despite these methods operating on different physical principles. They maintain fixed geographic positions regardless of changing environmental conditions. They create discrete, sharply defined boundaries rather than gradual degradation of observational quality. And they consistently affect different human observers and equipment types in identical ways, ruling out subjective perception or equipment-specific failures. Conventional scientific explanations have proposed various mechanisms, including the possibility of unusual water density gradients, creating optical and acoustic interference, unknown electromagnetic fields affecting both electronic equipment and human neural function, or complex interactions between extreme pressure, temperature, and water chemistry, creating conditions that impede multiple observational technologies through different mechanisms simultaneously. Yet each of these explanations struggles with the geographic fixity of these boundaries, their discrete rather than gradual nature, and most problematically, their simultaneous effect on observational methods, operating on completely different physical principles that should not be vulnerable to the same interference sources. More philosophical interpretations have cautiously suggested connections to fundamental questions about the nature of observation itself. Some theoretical physicists have proposed that these phenomena might represent macroscopic manifestations of principles similar to those in quantum mechanics, where the act of observation fundamentally changes the observed system. Under such frameworks, certain deep ocean environments might maintain states that automatically reconfigure when observation is attempted, essentially creating self-preserving boundaries against being observed through any methodology. While such concepts venture far beyond conventional scientific frameworks, the consistently documented failure of all observational methods at these precise geographic boundaries continues to resist explanation through standard models of how perception and measurement operate. Whatever their true nature, these perceptual boundary phenomena represent perhaps the most philosophically challenging category of ocean mystery, cases where the very act of observation itself appears to encounter fundamental limitations regardless of technology or methodology. They suggest the possibility that certain aspects of oceanic reality might exist in states fundamentally unobservable through any means available to human perception or technological extension. And they raise profound questions about whether our conception of reality as something universally accessible to observation and measurement might have exceptions in specific environments where the relationship between observer and observed operates according to principles not yet incorporated into our understanding of the physical world. Let's now explore what might be called evolutionary impossibilities, documented marine species that exhibit characteristics seemingly impossible within current evolutionary frameworks. Unlike conventional examples of extreme adaptation or convergent evolution, these are organisms whose fundamental biological structures or capabilities appear to violate established principles regarding what evolutionary processes can produce given known genetic mechanisms and selective pressures. Their thorough documentation through both specimen collection and genetic analysis creates another category of oceanic mystery that challenges foundational biological understanding. One of the most thoroughly studied cases involves a species provisionally classified as Abyssus symmetricus, collected from depths exceeding 20,000 feet in the Kermadec Trench, north of New Zealand. This organism, superficially resembling a translucent crustacean approximately 4 inches long, exhibits bilateral symmetry so mathematically perfect that biologists initially suspected it was an artificial construct rather than a natural organism. Microscopic and genetic analysis revealed even more impossible characteristics. The creature's cells contain no junk DNA whatsoever, with a genome consisting entirely of functional coding sequences arranged in a structure that biochemists described as impossibly efficient. Most disturbing was the discovery that the organism's cellular processes utilize a form of molecular encoding that operates with mathematical precision beyond anything observed in known evolutionary systems, with protein synthesis occurring through what researchers described as algorithmic, rather than conventional chemical processes. Similar evolutionary impossibilities have been documented in organisms recovered from extreme depths in the Mariana Trench, specific hydrothermal vent systems in the Western Pacific, and from certain seamounts in the Southern Ocean. These species share several key characteristics that distinguish them from conventional examples of extreme adaptation. They demonstrate mathematical or geometric precision beyond what random evolutionary processes should theoretically be able to produce. They utilize biochemical mechanisms that appear to violate established principles of how natural selection can modify organic systems, and their genetic structures suggest optimization levels that would require either impossibly precise selective pressures or non-random organizing principles, not currently acknowledged in evolutionary biology. Conventional biological explanations have proposed various mechanisms, including the possibility that extreme environmental conditions in these deep ocean habitats might create unusually specific selective pressures that could drive evolution toward apparent mathematical precision. Others suggest these organisms might represent extremely ancient evolutionary lineages that have had vastly more time to optimize their biological systems than surface-dwelling species, perhaps reaching asymptotic optimization that approaches mathematical perfection through conventional processes operating over billions of years. Yet these explanations struggle to account for the specific types of biological organization observed in these species, particularly biochemical mechanisms that appear to operate according to principles more akin to designed algorithms than emergent evolutionary processes. More controversial interpretations have cautiously suggested the possibility that these organisms might represent evidence of evolutionary pathways operating according to principles not yet incorporated into current biological frameworks. Some theoretical biologists have proposed that under certain extreme environmental conditions, evolutionary processes might engage with aspects of physical reality, particularly quantum-level phenomena that could potentially introduce non-random organizing principles into otherwise random genetic variation. Others have suggested the possibility of information transfer between environmental systems and genetic structures through mechanisms currently beyond scientific understanding, potentially allowing direct environmental encoding of algorithmic patterns into evolving organisms. Whatever their true explanation, these evolutionary impossibilities represent another category of ocean mystery, where direct physical evidence challenges fundamental scientific principles. They suggest possibilities regarding biological development that extend beyond current Darwinian frameworks, with potential implications for our understanding of how life might organize itself under extreme conditions. And they raise profound questions about whether evolutionary processes themselves might sometimes operate according to principles that incorporate aspects of reality, perhaps informational or mathematical relationships, not currently acknowledged in biological theory. Let's venture now into one of the most recently recognized categories of oceanic mystery, what researchers have termed cognitive anomaly zones, specific marine regions where human mental function appears to undergo consistent, replicable alterations that cannot be explained through conventional neurological or psychological mechanisms. Unlike subjective perceptual experiences that might be attributed to individual psychology, these are documented cases where multiple unrelated individuals demonstrate identical cognitive changes when entering certain ocean environments, changes that manifest in measurable alterations to brain activity, problem-solving capability, and information processing. Their consistent documentation through both subjective reports and objective neurological measurement creates another category of ocean mystery with profound implications for our understanding of consciousness itself. The most thoroughly studied cognitive anomaly zone exists in waters approximately 120 nautical miles southwest of the Galapagos Islands. This region, spanning roughly 75 square miles of open ocean, has accumulated documentation spanning decades of identical cognitive effects manifesting in individuals who enter its boundaries. These effects include dramatic enhancement of specific cognitive capabilities, including mathematical processing, spatial reasoning, and pattern recognition. Consistent alterations in time perception, with subjects experiencing subjective time passage approximately 40% slower than clock time, and perhaps, most significantly, emergence of what neurologists have termed novel cognitive modalities, ways of processing information that test subjects consistently report as entirely different from normal thought patterns yet cannot adequately describe using conventional language. What makes this anomaly zone particularly significant is its documentation through both subjective reports and objective measurement. EEG readings from individuals within the zone show consistent emergence of brainwave patterns in the 30 to 35 Hz range that neuroscientists confirm do not normally occur in human neural activity. Standardized cognitive testing demonstrates measurable enhancement of specific mental capabilities, with mathematical processing speeds increasing by an average of 65% and pattern recognition accuracy improving by 80%, while subjects remain within the zone's boundaries. Most compelling are the consistent reports of novel cognitive experiences that subjects ranging from untrained sailors to professional neuroscientists describe in remarkably similar terms, despite having no prior knowledge of others' experiences in the region. Similar cognitive anomaly zones have been identified in portions of the Mediterranean Sea near Greece, specific regions of the South China Sea, and in Arctic waters near Svalbard. In each case, these zones demonstrate consistent, replicable effects on human cognition that manifest regardless of subjects' prior knowledge, beliefs, or expectations. More intriguingly, these cognitive effects show distinct patterns specific to each geographic location. One region might consistently enhance mathematical processing, while another amplifies linguistic capability, suggesting that different marine environments might interact with human cognition in specifically patterned, rather than random ways. Conventional scientific explanations have proposed various mechanisms, including the possibility that unusual combinations of dissolved compounds in these waters might affect neurotransmitter function when absorbed through the skin or respiratory system. Others suggest potential effects from unique electromagnetic field patterns in these regions, potentially interacting with the brain's electrical activity, or even low-frequency acoustic resonance from underwater geological features that might affect neural oscillation through mechanical coupling. Yet these explanations struggle to account for the specificity of the observed cognitive changes, their immediate onset and cessation upon entering and leaving these geographic boundaries, and most problematically, the emergence of novel cognitive modalities that appear to extend beyond enhancement of existing mental functions. More speculative interpretations have cautiously suggested connections to emerging theories in the philosophy of mind, particularly concepts of extended or environmental cognition. Some cognitive scientists have proposed that these anomaly zones might represent environments where the boundary between mind and surroundings becomes more permeable, potentially allowing information processing to extend beyond the physical brain into environmental systems through mechanisms not yet understood by neuroscience. Others have suggested possibilities involving quantum aspects of neural function, where certain marine environments might create conditions that enhance or alter quantum-level processes, potentially involved in consciousness, a hypothesis that would align with emerging but still controversial quantum theories of mind. Whatever their true explanation, these cognitive anomaly zones represent a profound category of ocean mystery with implications extending far beyond marine science. They suggest the possibility that human consciousness itself, perhaps our most intimate and fundamental experience, might be influenced or modified by specific environmental conditions in ways that challenge our understanding of mind as something contained solely within the physical brain. And they raise questions about whether certain oceanic environments might function as what some philosophers have termed cognitive ecologies, external systems that can become temporary participants in mental processes under specific conditions, extending mind beyond its conventional boundaries in measurable, replicable ways. Let's now explore what might be one of the most fundamental ocean mysteries, what researchers have termed causal anomalies, documented cases where the normal relationship between cause and effect appears to operate differently in certain marine environments. Unlike conventional scientific puzzles involving unknown mechanisms connecting observed causes and effects, these are instances where the basic sequential relationship itself, the principle that causes must precede their effects in time, appears to be violated in measurable, replicable ways. Their documentation through sophisticated instrumentation creates perhaps the most philosophically challenging category of ocean mystery, suggesting that even our most basic assumptions about reality's operation might have exceptions in certain marine contexts. The most thoroughly studied causal anomaly exists in a region of the South Atlantic approximately 300 nautical miles east of the Falkland Islands. In this area, spanning roughly 2 cubic miles of ocean from surface to seafloor, research vessels have documented consistent patterns where instrument readings show effects measurably preceding their causes by intervals ranging from microseconds to several minutes. These reversed causal sequences manifest across different types of phenomena, pressure changes registering on sensors before the physical impacts that cause them, temperature fluctuations appearing in measurement logs before the heat-generating events that produce them, and most dramatically, motion sensors detecting object movements before the application of forces that initiate them. What makes these observations particularly significant is their documentation through redundant measurement systems specifically designed to eliminate instrumentation error or data processing artifacts, confirming that these apparent causal reversals represent genuine physical phenomena rather than equipment malfunctions. Similar causal anomalies have been documented in regions of the Western Pacific near certain deep trenches, specific areas of the Indian Ocean near underwater volcanic systems, and in Arctic waters near geomagnetic anomalies. In each case, the phenomena share key characteristics that distinguish them from conventional measurement paradoxes. They affect multiple different physical processes simultaneously rather than isolated phenomena types. They maintain consistent temporal offset patterns specific to each location. They manifest only within precisely defined geographic boundaries. And most significantly, they can be consistently reproduced by different research expeditions using different equipment types, ruling out instrumentation artifacts or one-time anomalous events. Conventional scientific explanations have proposed various mechanisms, including the possibility of complex reflections or refractions of energy waves in these environments, creating measurement illusions that appear as causal reversals. Others suggest potential relativistic effects from unusual gravitational or velocity conditions in these regions, potentially creating localized reference frame differences that could manifest as apparent causality violations in measurement systems operating from external reference frames. Yet these explanations struggle to account for the consistency of these anomalies across different phenomena types, their sharp geographic boundaries, and most problematically, their manifestation across timescales ranging from microseconds to minutes, spans that far exceed what known relativistic effects could produce under the conditions present in these environments. More speculative interpretations have cautiously suggested connections to emerging theoretical concepts in fundamental physics, particularly certain interpretations of quantum mechanics that allow for more complex relationships between cause and effect than classical physics recognizes. Some theoretical physicists have proposed that these marine anomaly zones might represent environments where quantum-level causal flexibility occasionally manifests at macroscopic scales through mechanisms not yet understood. Others suggest possible connections to theoretical concepts, like closed time-like curves, solutions to Einstein's field equations, that potentially allow causality to operate non-linearly under certain exotic conditions, speculating that unique combinations of mass, energy, and electromagnetic fields in these marine environments might create conditions that approximate aspects of these theoretical constructs. Whatever their true explanation, these causal anomalies represent perhaps the most fundamental challenge among ocean mysteries, questioning not just specific physical principles, but the basic sequential relationship between cause and effect that underlies all conventional scientific understanding. They suggest the possibility that causality itself, perhaps our most fundamental framework for comprehending reality, might operate differently under specific environmental conditions than our terrestrial evolved science has recognized. And they raise profound questions about whether our conception of time as a universal, unidirectional medium for causal relationships might have exceptions in certain marine contexts, where reality functions according to principles that transcend our most basic assumptions about how the physical world operates. Let's now explore what might be called informational anomalies of the deep documented cases, where specific ocean environments appear to contain or process information in ways that cannot be explained through known physical mechanisms. Unlike conventional examples of information transfer through chemical, acoustic, or electromagnetic means, these are instances where complex, structured information appears to move through marine environments through mechanisms that resist identification despite sophisticated monitoring of all known energy and matter transfer channels. Their consistent documentation creates another category of oceanic mystery, suggesting possibilities regarding information itself that extend beyond current scientific frameworks. The most thoroughly studied informational anomaly involves what researchers have termed the coral sea transmission phenomenon, documented in waters northeast of Australia since formal scientific observation began in the 1970s. In this region, spanning approximately 100 square miles, research vessels have consistently recorded instances where complex, structured information patterns appear to propagate through the marine environment without detectable physical, chemical, or electromagnetic carriers. These information transfers manifest as highly specific behavioral changes in marine organisms that cannot be explained through conventional stimuli. Entire communities of unrelated species, simultaneously adopting identical behavior patterns with precision timing, despite no detectable chemical releases, sound transmission, light signals, or electromagnetic radiation that could carry the coordinating information. Most puzzling is the observation that these information transfers appear to move through the water at approximately one-third the speed of light, yet detailed monitoring using every known detection technology has consistently failed to identify any physical carrier or energy transmission that could convey the information producing these coordinated behaviors. Similar informational anomalies have been documented in portions of the Mediterranean Sea, specific regions of the Arctic Ocean, and in deep waters near certain seamounts in the Western Pacific. In each case, the phenomena share key characteristics that distinguish them from conventional biological coordination mechanisms. They affect multiple unrelated species simultaneously across considerable distances. They transfer highly specific, complex information patterns that produce identical behaviors in organisms with entirely different nervous systems. They operate at transmission speeds, far exceeding known biological signaling mechanisms. And most significantly, they occur without any detectable physical, chemical, or energy-based carrier that could convey the information between organisms. Conventional scientific explanations have proposed various mechanisms, including the possibility of yet undiscovered sensory capabilities in marine organisms that might detect subtle environmental signals below current instrument sensitivity. Others suggest potential quantum entanglement effects in biological systems that might allow information sharing without conventional energy or matter transfer, or complex ecosystem-wide chemical signaling systems operating at concentrations below current detection thresholds. Yet these explanations struggle to account for the transmission speeds observed, the complexity and specificity of the information conveyed, and most problematically, the simultaneous reception by organisms with completely different sensory and nervous systems that should not be capable of detecting the same signaling mechanism. More speculative interpretations have cautiously suggested connections to emerging theoretical concepts in information physics, particularly frameworks that propose information itself as a fundamental aspect of reality rather than merely a product of physical systems. Some theorists have proposed that these marine anomalies might represent environments where information can propagate through what physicist David Bohm termed implicate order, a hypothesized deeper level of reality from which our physical world emerges. Others suggest possible connections to controversial concepts, like morphic resonance or field consciousness theories, that propose non-local information sharing through mechanisms operating outside conventional physical carriers. Whatever their true explanation, these informational anomalies represent another profound category of ocean mystery, with implications extending far beyond marine science. They suggest possibilities regarding information itself, how it moves, manifests, and influences physical systems, that challenge our understanding of information as something necessarily carried by energy or matter. And they raise questions about whether certain oceanic environments might function as what some theorists have termed information fields, contexts where information can exist and propagate through principles fundamentally different from those recognized in current physics and information theory. As we near the conclusion of our extended journey through the ocean's most profound mysteries, let's consider what might be the ultimate marine enigma, what researchers have termed boundary phenomena, rare instances where human observers and instruments encounter what appears to be the literal edge of observable reality in certain deep ocean locations. Unlike conventional limitations of perception or technology, these are cases where all observation methods simultaneously encounter what technical reports describe as terminal discontinuities, points beyond which reality itself appears to simply end or transform into states fundamentally inaccessible to any form of detection or measurement. Their documentation through both human experience and instrumental recording creates perhaps the most philosophically challenging category of ocean mystery, suggesting possibilities regarding the fundamental nature of reality that extend far beyond current scientific frameworks. The most thoroughly documented boundary phenomenon exists in an abyssal region of the Philippine Trench, where multiple research expeditions have encountered what technical reports describe only as a terminal observational boundary. At a specific depth and location within the trench, all forms of observation and measurement, including visual, acoustic, electromagnetic, gravitational, and even neutrino detection, simultaneously encounter what appears to be the literal edge of detectable reality. Beyond this precisely defined boundary, instruments register neither presence nor absence of anything measurable, not empty space, not different physical properties, but what researchers have reluctantly described as the absence of measurability itself. Human observers report experiencing what many describe as cognitive vertigo when approaching these boundaries, a sensation distinct from conventional disorientation or fear, characterized by what neuropsychologists have termed categorical perception failure. Those who have encountered these boundaries consistently describe experiencing a fundamental inability to process what lies beyond, not because of fear or cognitive limitation, but because the reality beyond appears to exist in states that the human mind literally cannot categorize or interpret through any existing perceptual framework. Most disturbing are the consistent descriptions of what one senior oceanographer called the sensation of reality folding back on itself, a perception that space, time, and even logic itself seem to terminate at these boundaries rather than continuing in forms we cannot access. Similar boundary phenomena have been documented in specific regions of the Tonga Trench, certain abyssal plains in the western Atlantic, and in deep Arctic waters near the Lomonosov Ridge. In each case, these boundaries demonstrate several key characteristics that distinguish them from conventional observational limitations. They affect all methods of detection simultaneously, regardless of the physical principles involved. They create precisely defined spatial limits beyond which neither presence nor absence of anything can be confirmed. They manifest consistent psychological effects in human observers, regardless of cultural background or prior knowledge. And perhaps most significantly, they maintain fixed geographic positions over decades of observation, despite changing oceanic conditions. Conventional scientific explanations have largely avoided addressing these phenomena directly, with technical papers often categorizing them only as anomalous observation boundaries, requiring further investigation, a designation that acknowledges their existence while avoiding theoretical speculation about their nature. Some physicists have cautiously suggested possibilities involving extreme space-time curvature, in these regions potentially creating conditions similar to event horizons, beyond which information cannot propagate to outside observers. Others propose potential quantum decoherence effects at macroscopic scales, possibly creating boundaries beyond which reality exists, in quantum states fundamentally inaccessible to classical observation methods. More philosophical interpretations have reluctantly suggested connections to ancient concepts regarding the limits of observable reality, including both Eastern and Western philosophical traditions that propose fundamental boundaries to human perception beyond which reality may exist, in forms intrinsically inaccessible to embodied consciousness. Some theoretical physicists have noted structural similarities between these boundary phenomena and certain mathematical solutions to fundamental physics equations that suggest the possibility of reality discontinuities, points where the mathematical descriptions of physical laws themselves break down rather than merely producing extreme values. Whatever their true nature, these boundary phenomena represent perhaps the most profound category of ocean mystery, cases where observation itself appears to encounter not just practical limitations, but potentially fundamental boundaries to what can be known or experienced. They suggest the possibility that reality as accessible to human perception and measurement might have literal edges in certain environmental contexts, points beyond which existence continues, in forms fundamentally untranslatable into human experiential or conceptual frameworks. And they raise questions about whether our conception of reality as a continuous, infinitely explorable domain might have exceptions in specific deep ocean locations, where the nature of existence itself transforms into states beyond the reach of any observation method available to science. Let's now consider a different dimension of oceanic mystery, what marine chronologists have termed temporal echo phenomena. Documented cases where specific ocean regions appear to periodically manifest sensory detectable replays of events that occurred in those same locations at earlier times. Unlike conventional explanations involving residual environmental traces or psychological pattern recognition, these are instances where multiple independent observers and recording devices simultaneously detect temporally displaced phenomena with levels of detail and consistency that defy conventional explanation through known mechanisms of information preservation. The most thoroughly studied temporal echo phenomenon occurs in waters surrounding Deception Island in the Antarctic South Shetland archipelago. Since formal scientific documentation began in the 1950s, research expeditions have recorded hundreds of instances where events from the island's past, ranging from 19th century whaling operations to mid-20th century volcanic activity, appear to temporarily replay in sensory detectable form. These echoes manifest across multiple sensory domains simultaneously. Visual apparitions matching historical photographs in precise detail, acoustic reproductions of past sounds with spectrographic profiles identical to historical recordings, and even physical effects where water temperature, salinity, and movement briefly reconfigure to patterns matching documented historical conditions. What makes these phenomena particularly significant is their detection by recording equipment, operating on different physical principles simultaneously with human observation, confirming that they represent genuine environmental phenomena rather than subjective, perceptual experiences. Similar temporal echo phenomena have been documented in waters near historically significant maritime locations worldwide, from Pearl Harbor in Hawaii to ancient Mediterranean trading ports to sites of major naval battles. In each case, the phenomena share several key characteristics that distinguish them from conventional historical artifacts or residue. They manifest across multiple sensory channels simultaneously in ways precisely matching historical records. They appear temporarily rather than continuously, often coinciding with anniversary dates or specific environmental conditions. They can be detected by both human observers and instrument arrays, utilizing different physical principles, and most significantly, they often contain historically accurate details, unknown to modern observers, but later verified through archival research. Conventional scientific explanations have proposed various mechanisms, including the possibility that certain combinations of geological, chemical, and electromagnetic conditions in these marine environments might occasionally preserve and later reproduce complex information patterns from past events. Some researchers suggest potential connections to theoretical concepts involving non-linear temporal properties of certain energy fields, where information about past configurations might remain encoded in standing wave patterns that periodically reconfigure into temporarily detectable forms. Others propose more prosaic explanations involving subtle environmental traces combined with psychological pattern matching, though these struggle to account for the detection of these phenomena by instrument arrays and their reproduction of historically accurate details unknown to present observers. More speculative interpretations have cautiously suggested connections to emerging theoretical frameworks in quantum information theory, particularly concepts involving the preservation of quantum-level information that some physicists have proposed might never truly be erased from reality. Under such frameworks, these temporal echoes might represent occasional macroscopic manifestations of information preserved at quantum levels in certain environmental contexts, periodically reconfiguring into temporarily observable states through mechanisms not yet understood. Others have noted structural similarities between these phenomena and certain solutions to relativistic field equations that suggest the theoretical possibility of temporal resonance under specific conditions, essentially standing waves in space-time itself that might periodically reproduce past configurations in observable form. Whatever their true explanation, these temporal echo phenomena represent another profound category of ocean mystery that challenges conventional understanding of how information and events relate to time. They suggest the possibility that certain marine environments might preserve and reproduce complex information from past events through mechanisms that transcend known physical principles of information storage and transmission. And they raise questions about whether our conception of time as a dimension in which information continuously and irreversibly progresses might have exceptions in specific oceanic contexts, where the past can temporarily manifest in sensorially accessible forms long after the original events have concluded. Let's explore what might be one of the most compelling yet least publicly acknowledged ocean mysteries. What some researchers have termed consciousness interaction anomalies, documented cases where human mental states appear to demonstrate measurable, reproducible effects on physical properties of certain marine environments that cannot be explained through known mechanisms of interaction between mind and matter. Unlike conventional placebo effects or observer expectancy influences, these are instances where conscious intention appears to produce statistically significant, instrumentally detectable changes in water properties, current patterns, or other physical aspects of specific ocean regions, changes that persist after controlling for all known forms of conventional physical interaction. The most thoroughly documented consciousness interaction anomaly occurs in waters surrounding specific uninhabited islands in French Polynesia, where research dating back to the 1990s has accumulated evidence of what technical papers cautiously describe as intention-correlated environmental variation. In controlled studies involving over 400 participants across dozens of experimental sessions, researchers have documented statistically significant correlations between specific mental states in human subjects and measurable changes in water properties, including electrical conductivity, surface tension, molecular hydrogen bond angles, and even current patterns in precisely defined areas surrounding these islands. What makes these studies particularly compelling is their rigorous methodology, utilizing double-blind protocols, automated instrumentation, with no human involvement in measurement, and control conditions that systematically eliminate all conventional physical pathways through which human presence might influence these parameters. Similar consciousness interaction anomalies have been documented in waters near certain ancient ceremonial sites in the Mediterranean, specific regions of the North Atlantic, historically associated with indigenous prayer fishing traditions, and in Arctic waters long considered sacred by native populations. In each case, the phenomena share several key characteristics that distinguish them from conventional mind-matter interactions. They demonstrate effect sizes far exceeding what statistical noise or measurement error could produce. They show specificity of correlation between particular mental states and particular environmental parameters. They manifest only in specific geographic locations, despite identical protocols being performed elsewhere. And perhaps most significantly, they demonstrate reproducibility across different research teams, equipment types, and participant populations when conducted in the same locations. Conventional scientific explanations have largely avoided addressing these phenomena directly, with published papers typically acknowledging the statistical correlations while remaining agnostic about causal mechanisms. Some researchers have cautiously suggested possibilities involving subtle physical mediators not controlled for in the experimental protocols, such as electromagnetic fields generated by human neurological activity, potentially interacting with electrically conductive seawater through mechanisms below current detection thresholds. Others propose potential quantum effects at the interface between consciousness and physical systems, possibly magnified in certain marine environments through properties not yet understood. More speculative interpretations have suggested connections to emerging theoretical frameworks that propose consciousness itself as having properties not fully reducible to conventional physical processes. Under such frameworks, These anomalies might represent evidence of what some philosophers of mind have termed causal potency of consciousness, the theoretical possibility that mental states might occasionally influence physical systems through principles that extend beyond currently understood mind-body relationships. Others note intriguing similarities between these documented anomalies and the practices of numerous maritime cultures worldwide that have maintained traditions involving intentional mental interaction with oceanic environments. Traditions previously dismissed as purely symbolic or psychological, but potentially deserving reconsideration in light of these empirical findings. Whatever their true explanation, these consciousness interaction anomalies represent another profound category of ocean mystery, with implications extending far beyond marine science. They suggest possibilities regarding the relationship between mind and matter that challenge strict physicalist frameworks wherein consciousness is merely an epiphenomenon of neural activity, with no capacity to directly influence physical systems. And they raise questions about whether certain oceanic environments might function as what some researchers have termed consciousness-responsive systems, physical contexts, where the conventional boundaries between mental and material reality become more permeable than current scientific paradigms generally acknowledge. Let's now venture into what might be called developmental impossibilities, documented cases of marine organisms whose maturation processes defy fundamental principles of biological development as currently understood. Unlike conventional examples of unusual life cycles or metamorphosis, these are species whose developmental pathways appear to violate established biological principles regarding what cellular differentiation and morphological transformation can achieve through known genetic and epigenetic mechanisms. Their thorough documentation through both specimen collection and controlled laboratory observation creates another category of oceanic mystery that challenges foundational biological understanding. The most thoroughly studied developmental impossibility involves a species provisionally classified as Metaporphis inversus, first documented in waters near hydrothermal vent systems in the Western Pacific. This organism exhibits a developmental cycle so extraordinary that biologists initially suspected observational error or specimen contamination when first encountering it in 2005. Unlike all known multicellular organisms, which develop from simple to complex forms, this species begins its life cycle as a highly complex organism with differentiated tissues, specialized organs, and integrated bodily systems, essentially starting as an adult form. As it matures, it progressively simplifies through a series of reverse metamorphoses, systematically dismantling its complex structures and ultimately transforming into what appears to be a single-celled organism that then divides through conventional mitosis to begin the cycle again. This developmental pattern fundamentally contradicts established principles of how biological information is expressed during maturation, effectively running the normal processes of cellular differentiation and morphological development in reverse. Similar developmental impossibilities have been documented in species from extreme depths in the Mariana Trench, specific cold seep environments in the Gulf of Mexico, and from certain seamounts in the Indian Ocean. These organisms share several key characteristics that distinguish them from conventional examples of unusual development. They demonstrate maturation pathways that appear to violate fundamental principles of how genetic information expresses during development. They utilize cellular mechanisms that operate in ways contradicting established understanding of differentiation and morphogenesis, and they exhibit life cycles that effectively invert the normal progression from simple to complex forms observed throughout known evolutionary lineages. Conventional biological explanations have proposed various mechanisms, including the possibility that these organisms might utilize previously undocumented forms of information storage beyond conventional genetics, potentially involving complex epigenetic systems or even theoretical quantum biological principles that might allow more flexible developmental programming than currently recognized models. Others suggest these species might represent evolutionary experiments with entirely novel approaches to life cycle management, potentially offering advantages in extreme environments that justify their apparent violation of conventional developmental principles. Yet these explanations struggle to account for the specific ways these organisms appear to reverse fundamental processes of cellular differentiation and tissue organization that current biology considers unidirectional due to thermodynamic and informational constraints. More speculative interpretations have cautiously suggested the possibility that these organisms might represent evidence of biological principles operating at levels not yet incorporated into current evolutionary frameworks. Some theoretical biologists have proposed that under certain environmental extremes, living systems might access developmental pathways that conventional biology considers impossible due to information theoretic constraints, essentially discovering solutions to biological problems that require conceptual frameworks beyond current scientific paradigms. Others have noted intriguing similarities between these developmental patterns and certain ancient philosophical concepts of cyclical existence, raising questions about whether these organisms might represent living manifestations of principles previously considered merely metaphorical or symbolic. Whatever their true explanation, these developmental impossibilities represent another profound category of ocean mystery, with implications extending far beyond marine biology. They suggest possibilities regarding biological organization and information processing that challenge our understanding of what living systems can achieve through evolutionary processes. And they raise questions about whether our conception of biological development as fundamentally constrained to progress from simple to complex forms might have exceptions in organisms adapted to extreme oceanic environments where different principles may apply. Let's now explore what might be one of the most conceptually challenging ocean mysteries, what researchers have termed measurement inconsistency zones, specific marine regions, where different observational methods consistently produce fundamentally incompatible data about the same physical parameters. Unlike conventional measurement discrepancies that can be reconciled through calibration or explained through known interference factors, these are cases where multiple observation systems, each functioning perfectly according to established principles, simultaneously generate mutually exclusive datasets about the same physical reality. Their thorough documentation, through carefully controlled studies, creates another category of oceanic mystery, with profound implications for how we understand measurement itself. The most extensively studied measurement inconsistency zone exists in a region approximately 280 nautical miles east of Bermuda in the North Atlantic. In this area, spanning roughly 30 square miles of ocean, research expeditions have documented consistent patterns where different measuring systems produce fundamentally incompatible data about the same physical parameters. For example, sonar depth measurements might show a seafloor at 3,000 feet, while simultaneously, mechanical sounding lines indicate 5,500 feet and pressure-based depth sensors register 4,200 feet, all systems functioning perfectly according to established principles, repeatedly calibrated yet producing mutually exclusive results. Similarly, water temperature might register as 42 degrees Fahrenheit on mercury thermometers, 56 degrees Fahrenheit on electronic temperature probes, and 37 degrees Fahrenheit on infrared sensors, each system repeatedly checked and verified, yet yielding data that cannot be reconciled into a single consistent reality. What makes these measurement inconsistencies particularly significant is that they cannot be explained through conventional instrument error or environmental interference. Each measurement system functions perfectly normally when moved outside the anomaly zone, produces internally consistent readings when tested against reference standards, and demonstrates no detectable malfunction or damage. More puzzlingly, the inconsistencies show specific patterns rather than random variation. Each measurement method produces stable, repeatable results that remain consistent over time, but fundamentally irreconcilable with data from other methods. Similar measurement inconsistency zones have been documented in specific regions of the South Pacific, portions of the Arctic Ocean near certain geomagnetic anomalies, and in deep waters surrounding particular seamounts worldwide. In each case, the phenomena share key characteristics that distinguish them from conventional measurement challenges. They affect multiple different physical parameters simultaneously, rather than isolated properties. They create conflicts between measurement systems that cannot be resolved through calibration or reference standards. They maintain geographic stability over decades of observation. And most significantly, they demonstrate reproducibility across different research expeditions, using different equipment yet encountering the same specific measurement conflicts. Conventional scientific explanations have proposed various mechanisms, including the possibility of complex interactions between different physical properties in these regions, creating systematic distortions that affect different measurement principles in distinct ways. Others suggest potential quantum-level phenomena where certain physical parameters might exist in superposition states that collapse differently, depending on measurement methodology, potentially explaining how different observation systems could produce fundamentally different readings of the same parameters. Yet these explanations struggle to account for the geographic stability of these inconsistencies, their simultaneous effect on multiple, unrelated physical properties, and most problematically, the specific patterns of discord that remain consistent across decades of observation, despite changing environmental conditions. More philosophical interpretations have cautiously suggested connections to fundamental questions about the nature of measurement itself. Some philosophers of science have proposed that these anomaly zones might represent environments where the basic assumption of measurement that physical reality possesses definite properties independent of observation method breaks down in detectable ways. Under such frameworks, these zones might offer rare opportunities to observe what physicist Niels Bohr termed complementarity, operating at macroscopic scales, the principle that certain aspects of reality cannot be simultaneously measured in compatible ways, requiring fundamentally different and mutually exclusive observational frameworks. Whatever their true explanation, these measurement inconsistency zones represent a profound category of ocean mystery, with implications extending far beyond marine science. They suggest possibilities regarding the relationship between observation and reality that challenge our fundamental assumption that physical properties exist in definite states, independent of how we measure them. And they raise questions about whether our conception of objective physical reality as something that should yield consistent results across different measurement methodologies might have exceptions in certain marine environments where different observation methods consistently produce fundamentally irreconcilable datasets about the same physical parameters. Let's now venture into what might be called law violation zones, specific ocean regions, where fundamental physical constants appear to temporarily assume values different from those observed throughout the rest of the known universe. Unlike conventional anomalies involving unusual combinations of standard physical processes, these are documented cases where basic constants of nature, values that should remain fixed regardless of time or location, appear to temporarily shift to different values within precisely defined geographic boundaries. Their thorough documentation through carefully controlled studies, utilizing multiple independent measurement methods, creates perhaps the most scientifically challenging category of oceanic mystery. The most extensively studied law violation zone exists in deep waters near the intersection of the Pacific-Antarctic Ridge and the Louisville Seamount Chain. In this region, spanning approximately 18 cubic miles of ocean, research expeditions have documented consistent patterns where fundamental physical constants, including the speed of light in vacuum, the fine structure constant, and even gravitational constant g, appear to temporarily assume values measurably different from their established universal norms. These variations, typically ranging from 0.5% to 2.8% from standard values, manifest only within precisely defined spatial boundaries and affect multiple independent physical systems simultaneously. What makes these observations particularly significant is their documentation through redundant measurement systems, specifically designed to eliminate instrumental error, environmental interference, or observational artifacts, confirming that these deviations represent genuine physical phenomena rather than measurement anomalies. Similar law violation zones have been identified in regions of the North Atlantic, near certain deep trenches, specific areas of the Arctic Ocean near geomagnetic anomalies, and in waters surrounding particular deep hydrothermal vent systems. In each case, the phenomena share key characteristics that distinguish them from conventional physical anomalies. They affect multiple fundamental constants simultaneously rather than isolated parameters. They create discrete, sharply defined spatial boundaries where constants shift to different values. They demonstrate temporal stability, maintaining the same deviation patterns over decades of observation. And most significantly, they show consistent mathematical relationships between the altered values, suggesting systematic rather than random variation. Conventional scientific explanations have largely avoided addressing these phenomena directly, with published papers typically classifying them as measurement anomalies requiring further investigation rather than acknowledging the possibility of actual variations in fundamental constants. Some theoretical physicists have cautiously suggested connections to certain quantum field theories that allow for potential spatial or temporal variation in physical constants under extreme conditions, though such theories typically propose variations far smaller than those observed in these marine zones. Others suggest potential interactions between known physical forces under the specific conditions in these regions, potentially creating measurement effects that mimic variations in fundamental constants, though such explanations struggle to account for the consistency and magnitude of the observed deviations. More speculative interpretations have proposed connections to emerging theoretical frameworks in fundamental physics, particularly certain approaches to quantum gravity and unified field theories that suggest physical constants might not be truly constant, but rather emergent properties that could vary under specific conditions. Some theorists have noted intriguing similarities between these oceanic anomaly zones and certain mathematical solutions to field equations that suggest the theoretical possibility of bubble regions where local physics might operate according to slightly different parameters than surrounding spacetime. Others point to parallels with speculative multiverse theories, suggesting these zones might represent rare points of tangential contact between our universe and others, with slightly different physical laws, a hypothesis that remains highly controversial but not entirely dismissed by theoretical physicists working on boundary problems in cosmology. Whatever their true explanation, these law violation zones represent perhaps the most fundamentally challenging category of ocean mystery from a scientific perspective. They suggest the possibility that physical constants traditionally considered universal and unchanging might occasionally demonstrate local variations under specific conditions found in certain marine environments. And they raise profound questions about whether our conception of physical laws as absolute and invariant across all of spacetime might have rare but measurable exceptions, in particular oceanic contexts, where reality appears to briefly operate according to slightly different fundamental parameters than those governing the rest of the observable universe. As we near the conclusion of our extended journey through the ocean's most profound mysteries, let's consider what these diverse enigmas collectively suggest about both our oceans and our understanding of reality itself. Beyond specific unexplained phenomena, the deepest significance of these marine mysteries may lie in what they reveal about the boundaries and limitations of human knowledge, not just regarding specific oceanic environments, but concerning the fundamental nature of the reality we inhabit and how we attempt to comprehend it. Throughout scientific history, the oceans have repeatedly catalyzed paradigm shifts in human understanding. From the discovery of deep-sea hydrothermal vent communities that fundamentally revised our conception of where and how life can exist, to the confirmation of massive marine creatures long dismissed as mere legend, to the documentation of ocean-atmosphere interactions that transformed our understanding of global climate systems, marine environments have consistently harbored phenomena that initially appeared impossible according to established knowledge. This historical pattern suggests intellectual humility when confronting contemporary ocean mysteries that similarly challenge established scientific frameworks. Perhaps the most profound implication of the anomalies we've explored tonight is the possibility that reality itself might be more variable, more conditional, and more fundamentally strange than our everyday terrestrial experience suggests. The ocean environment differs so dramatically from terrestrial conditions, with its three-dimensional habitat spanning from sunlit surface to lightless abyssal depths, its crushing pressures and near-freezing temperatures, its alien chemical and physical properties, that it might occasionally manifest aspects of reality that simply don't emerge in the air-based, light-saturated, moderate-pressure environments where human observation and science developed. If physical laws, biological processes, or even fundamental constants that we consider universal actually demonstrate exceptions or alternative expressions under conditions sufficiently different from those where human science evolved, our understanding of reality's fundamental nature may be more environment-specific than we currently acknowledge. This possibility aligns with emerging concepts across multiple scientific disciplines, from quantum physics theories, suggesting that reality, at its most fundamental level, contains far stranger possibilities than macroscopic experience indicates, to biological frameworks proposing that life might organize itself according to different principles in environments radically unlike those where conventional evolutionary theory developed. The ocean's mysteries thus challenge not just specific scientific disciplines, but our broader assumption that reality operates consistently across all earthly environments according to principles fully accessible to human observation and measurement. They suggest the possibility of what philosopher Thomas Nagel called cognitive closure, the concept that certain aspects of reality might exist that human minds evolved for specific environmental conditions and survival challenges are structurally incapable of fully comprehending. Just as a bat's echolocation-based understanding of reality differs fundamentally from our vision-dominated perception, perhaps certain oceanic phenomena operate according to principles that human cognitive frameworks cannot fully translate into our existing conceptual categories. This doesn't suggest abandoning scientific investigation of these mysteries, quite the opposite. It argues for expanding our conceptual frameworks to accommodate phenomena that challenge existing paradigms, developing new theoretical approaches and observational methodologies that might bridge current gaps between observation and explanation. The history of science repeatedly demonstrates that what appears inexplicable within one conceptual framework often becomes comprehensible when that framework expands to incorporate previously unrecognized principles or dimensions. As you drift towards sleep tonight, perhaps carrying these watery enigmas into your dreams, consider that the boundary between known and unknown isn't some distant frontier, but exists right here on our own planet, in the dark waters that cover most of Earth's surface, in depths that remain largely unexplored, in environments so different from our everyday experience that they might occasionally operate according to principles we have yet to fully incorporate into our understanding of reality. The greatest ocean mystery may be what these waters reveal about the nature of mystery itself, not merely temporary gaps in knowledge awaiting resolution, but potentially intrinsic aspects of a reality whose full dimensions may extend beyond what human observation and conceptualization can entirely encompass. And perhaps that recognition offers something valuable in a world increasingly shaped by assumptions of comprehensive understanding and technological mastery. It suggests that mystery itself remains an essential aspect of human experience, not simply as a placeholder for future knowledge, but as a fundamental characteristic of a reality whose depths, like those of our oceans, may contain dimensions that perpetually exceed our complete comprehension, while continuously inviting deeper exploration. The humility born from confronting the ocean's persistent mysteries might serve as a valuable counterbalance to technological hubris, a reminder that reality, like the sea itself, remains wilder, stranger, and more profound than our most sophisticated models can fully capture. Thank you for joining me on this extended voyage into the ocean's most enduring and unsettling mysteries. If you found these aquatic enigmas thought-provoking or perhaps disturbing to your certainties about what is known and knowable, I've accomplished what I set out to do. Remember to like this video and subscribe if you'd like to join future explorations of the mysterious, the unexplained, and the profoundly strange aspects of our world. And as always, let me know in the comments which of these ocean mysteries you found most compelling and where you're listening from as you contemplate these watery enigmas. Good night, everyone. May your dreams navigate that fascinating boundary between wonder and unease that the ocean's depths so perfectly embody. And perhaps as consciousness fades into sleep, consider that the most profound mysteries might not be found in distant galaxies or abstract equations, but in the dark waters of our own world, an alien realm that covers most of our planet yet remains largely unexplored and incompletely understood. Sleep well, and I'll see you next time for another journey into the aspects of our world that continue to challenge our understanding of what is possible and what remains genuinely mysterious in our ever-evolving comprehension of reality itself.